I completely 100% forgot what it was that I said we were going to talk about because I got into a Twitter fight with uh, with some people, and uh, one of them, well, both of them blocked me, but one of them blocked me before I could get any of the information. I got the screenshot of the other one who blocked me because I opened up their profile before they blocked me. But we were
What was it?
talking about the Republicans and passing, like the Civil Rights Act and freeing the slaves and things like that. And they're just like blatantly making shit up. And then I was, trying to, what do you call it? What the fuck is
What,
the?
that little video they made?
I don't know what you're talking about.
There's some Democratic campaign video from, I think, California. Jordan Peterson shared it. And one of the things that the Democrats in the video claim is their work on civil rights, which is adorable
Oh,
because they did nothing.
well, no. So, um, I don't remember what the original tweet was. I think the original person who tweeted it was one of the people who blocked me. Um, but
So wait, what were you?
I'm
So was it
trying to
just a
remember.
conversation about
Um,
Democrats and Republicans, or what?
so no, it was somebody said, "I'm screaming at the fact that you think it's possible to be a Republican who supports any kind of minorities." That was the comment from one of the people who didn't block me, but they just refused to engage with me. Um, and then this Adam Schiavone guy, he decided to engage me, but he blocked me, so I don't know what it was that he said. And then the other one, I don't know what their fucking name was. But basically, I was like, yeah, the party of Lincoln that passed the 13th Amendment, Civil Rights Act, the 19th Amendment. They don't actually support minorities. It's just a 160-year scam that they've been running by passing all these laws. Because obviously I was trying to bait a fight, and I succeeded. Um, but basically
Yeah,
it's
there's
like,
like this
no, none
common.
of that's right. The Democrats passed this, and the Democrats did this, and so I was like, shared some articles, and I asked for, and they pulled out the 1960s party switch, and I shared a link to the voting demographic map that literally records the presidential voting demographics for the entire history of the country from the beginning until this last election. And so
Mhm.
Goldwater, who lost, was a Republican that was like, I don't like black people. I'm with you guys in the South. And it's like, okay, so you're just in the wrong fucking party. He won like half of the southern states. I don't think he won Texas or Florida or South Carolina or Tennessee. I think he won like that little I don't even know. I call it the hillbilly belt. I don't know what you would call it, but those Gulf states, like Georgia, Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi. Like he won that strip of states right there, and they were like, "We're with Goldwater." Um, but before that, it was blue, and then after that, they voted independent. And the next year after that, they voted independent when it was Nixon's first run, and then in Nixon's second run, almost the entire nation went to Nixon. Like all of the states except for Maryland and D.C. All the rest of the map is fucking red, right? Like like this is the big party switch. Like four southern states voted for Goldwater, but he completely got blown the fuck out in the presidential election, which means that the majority of the Republicans throughout the nation didn't vote for the fucking guy. Um, and then Nixon won the first election, and the South that had previously voted for Goldwater, and then a couple more states went independent, so they didn't vote for Nixon, who was a Republican. So clearly they didn't go Republican. Then and then it was, I can't remember fucking what year it was. They voted for um, Nixon overwhelmingly throughout the entire country. So you can't be like, the South went Republican, big party switch. Like, literally the entire nation went Republican in that election. So it's kind of hard to point to that and be like, oh yeah, look at that, totally party switch. All of a sudden, all these Democrats were pissed off at the Democrat Party for, voting for civil rights, and therefore they voted for Republicans. Like, the demographic map disproves that. Um, but one of the articles that I had pulled up, and I was reading through it to see what it said, um, it plays a fun game, and I like it. Um, it's from the constitutioncenter.org, which I had never heard of, and I find them very dubious and questionable based on this first paragraph. Um, it says, on June 19th, 1964, the Senate ended a long debate, overcoming a record-setting filibuster to join the House in approving the Civil Rights Act. The landmark was a turning point in American history as it addressed discrimination and segregation on a national level. Now, one of the things that this article, when it continues to go on, it talks about a 24-hour filibuster from Strom Thurmond. Okay, so it mentions him, um, and that was the prior Civil Rights Act in the 1950s, which was under a Republican president, and that was filibustered. And then it starts talking about um, LBJ got involved with the civil rights fight when he became president, which I guess he was semi-involved when he was a senator before that. But he was committed to honoring Kennedy's legacy, which Kennedy was a supporter of the Civil Rights Act. Um, but it mentions the filibuster of the 1964 Act, but it does not say who it was, right? It does say committed to the filibuster effort were the powerful senators Richard Russell, Strom Thurmond, Robert Byrd, William Fulbright, and Sam Ervin. Russell started the filibuster in '64, and it would last for 60 working days in the Senate. Okay. Do you know who was the main filibuster? Right, that was Robert Byrd. You know who Robert Byrd is? No? Anybody?
Sorry, say again. You're cutting up a little bit.
Do you know who Robert Byrd is?
Heard the name. I haven't actually looked.
It's
No.
Bill Clinton's mentor, a former high-level recruiter for the KKK, and senator who Bill Clinton eulogized on his death in 2010. Okay? He was filibustering the Civil Rights Act. This is the mentor to Bill and Hillary Clinton. Okay? Think about that for a second. What party do you think he belonged to? He was a sitting senator until 2010, mind you. And this isn't obviously 1964 was quite a while ago, but Robert Byrd, the racist, being a Democrat in the Senate, that was 2010 when he died in the Senate. He was still in the Senate. Okay, so the KKK being in the Senate for the Democrat Party is not ancient history. So the article goes on, and they're basically saying that the Republicans are the party that's against it, and the Democrats are pushing hard to get what is it? Humphrey, a Democrat, worked together with his Republican colleagues to make the bill more acceptable to Republicans while not weakening its power. Now, there were Republicans who were against it, and obviously there were Republicans who voted against it. It's not some 100% party thing. Like the 13th Amendment was very much like almost the entire. I actually think every Republican in the Senate voted for the 13th Amendment to abolish slavery. Wasn't as much support for the Civil Rights Act because of some of the details, that were in it. But this whole article just goes on. Basically, this is a big Democrat thing that happened, that the Democrats did. and they're so great, and they convince the Republicans to get on board because reasons that are not explained at all in the article whatsoever as to why they were against it, who had to be convinced and why. Nor do they actually point out that the voting record um, of it, or like who voted for it and who voted against it by party, and what that entailed. And so 73% of Democrats and 94% of Republicans supported the bill, right? Did you did you know
Mm.
that?
Oh, I do now.
Right. So they're like, we had to convince those Republicans to support it. 94% of the Republican Party supported the bill. Democrats were the ones who filibustered the bill. Um, Democrats had a lower percentage of people from the party that were supporting the bill, and one of the big reasons that it actually got passed was because JFK was assassinated, right? This was like um, memorial legislation for JFK, right? So Democrats who didn't really care one way or the other about the Civil Rights Act got on board with it as a way to honor the legacy of JFK, who had just been assassinated, right? That's not mentioned anywhere. I can't. I'm like looking through articles and they don't talk about that at all. Like even at PolitiFacts, who raked so. Michael Steele said the Republican Party fought very hard in the 60s to get the Civil Rights Bill passed, as well as the Voting Rights Bill, and they rated that as true, right? And this was in 2010, um, but they don't mention that Democrats were the reason that it got 73% were because Democrats um, who did vote for it. Some of them were actual supporters and leaders of the movement to pass it, but the majority of them did it to honor the legacy of JFK, right? Like none of that even gets a mention from the scholars that they cite and source. But for some reason, they do bring up Barry Goldwater, who voted against the Civil Rights Act and was this is the same guy who had the Southern strategy to appeal to segregationists in the South who completely bombed when running for president, right? Um, like a rhino, Republican in name only, and he had a shit showing of running for president. Like it wasn't even a close election at all. By popular vote or electoral college, he just did badly all the way across the board. Um, and he is the one that had the Southern strategy. He's brought up as being a Republican who was against it because they're like, oh, the Republicans didn't support this unanimously. The Republicans, there were people in the Republican Party who were against the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Act, and completely leave out the fact that literal members of the KKK who were elected officials in the Democrat Party were also against it. PolitiFacts didn't feel the need to mention that. Um, it's not mentioned, but Barry Goldwater is. Um, they did actually bring up that Dwight Eisenhower, a Republican, supported civil rights legislation, um, but nothing that was even close to the level of the Civil Rights Act made it through the House and the Senate while he was in. There were smaller legislations that he signed, but nothing as big as the Civil Rights Act. Um,
Well, I mean, the question that I really have when people say that, because I've heard people specifically call the Republican Party like the party of the white people, or like the white people party.
right.
And my question really is, what is it exactly that you expect a political party to do? Is it supposed to be there for specific demographics of people, or is it supposed to represent a particular set of values?
Well, see,
You
yes.
know,
Now here's the thing, and that's what I was slow rolling towards is the Democrat Party from the break, because originally it was the Democratic Republican Party, right? So that was the name, and from John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson is where the party started to break up. There were the opposing parties to the Democratic Republic Party. Um, what is it? You had the Federalists, the Whigs. Um, how am I forgetting? Like the actual bigger one that was there. The Free Soil Party was one of them. Um, but what happened was the abolitionists finally, the ones that were following John Quincy Adams' side of the fracture of the party, they're the ones that broke off and created the Republican Party, and they basically had looked at the other party that had existed at the time, the Whig Party, and said they're ineffectual, and so the Free Soil Party didn't have any real leverage, and the Whig Party was doing all of these negotiations to allow the continuation of slavery. And so the abolitionists who were like, no, slavery is abhorrent and wrong and it just needs to be stopped, they broke off from all of those parties and to form the Republican Party. And ending slavery was literally the main reason. Like, that was the thing that it was orbited around. Um, and the Democrat Party from their creation had the ideological bend of it, where the Republican Party was the Negro Party, and the Democrat Party was the White Party. Um, and really, the Republican Party was more along the lines of like Lincoln would say, like the hand that picks the corn has the right to eat the corn, right? So basically, you have the right to the fruits of your labor. Um, like, and obviously he was the first Republican president ever. And it's like that's still a mainstay concept in the Republican Party, is like, if I'm working and I'm making a living, that's my living. You don't have a right to come take my shit. Leave me the fuck alone. Um, and you go all the way back to Lincoln, that's still um, something that's a part of the Republican Party. And the whole concept of what Lincoln was talking about was he was talking about slavery and how slavery isn't wrong because, the black people identity politics. Like, slavery is wrong is because these people are working hard and getting nothing for it. Um, you know what I mean? Like, that was how he described why slavery was wrong, was that it's an affront to your inalienable rights, and they have the right for all the labor that they're doing. They should be reaping the benefits, not some fucking asshole that's sitting up in a fucking mansion, sipping on his sweet tea. He shouldn't be reaping all the benefits from someone else's labor because he's contributing virtually nothing other than oppressing people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Lincoln's also.
Well, I mean, a lot of parties.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was going to add to that. Like, a lot of parties typically will start out as, a single issue party, right? They'll say, okay, we have this thing that we seem to think that a lot of people care about. They'll go through, they'll carry out that particular message. They'll get to a certain size, and then they'll start building out their party into other issues, and then that develops the overall philosophy of the party, like what they actually stand for, and then that evolves over time into different things, or maybe the party collapses, etc.
Well, yeah.
The Republican Party definitely has a set of values.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is the values, the things that Lincoln was saying about the problems of that day. You can take those quotes and you can look at, like, the majority of the Republican Party, and those would be things that they are still in agreement with, right? Like, if you went to a Democrat today, and there are a handful of quotes that you could get from Lincoln, and this is the party who wants to take credit for the history of Lincoln, but you could take a bunch of quotes from Lincoln, say them to any of these progressives running around who are claiming the legacy of Lincoln, and they would completely disagree with them. Whereas if you did the same thing with Lincoln's quotes and Republicans, the majority of Republicans would agree with them, even today. But
that's the thing about
party switch, but there's no evidence of.
Well, that's what they say, but I've never heard of that before either. I mean, the concepts of American conservatism do include egalitarianism, right? But it's the traditional definition of that word. That doesn't mean positive rights for people. That means everyone basically has an equal playing field, or it runs into the concept of negative rights. So
Right. Well, that's what I'm
basically,
saying. Is the hand
It's
that picks the
natural law
corn.
lending itself to negative rights.
The hand that picks the corn has the right to eat the corn. And that's your individual sovereignty. You don't have the right to take from others, right? You have the right to the benefit of the hard day's work that you do.
Endowed to you by God, for that matter, at
Yeah.
least back then.
Right.
yeah.
Let's see. Um,
Well, I always
Which meant
scratch
that the
my
negative
head
rights was
like,
even more important. It
what
wasn't
is
what do
infringing
you
on your
think? What do
God-given
you think
rights.
Republicans would say to the quote? This is one that is not a political quote from Lincoln, right? But what do you think the response from the left and the right would be to give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first 4 hours sharpening the axe? Right.
what's the context of that?
Well, that's
I don't know.
pretty
What do you mean?
straightforward. Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. Right? I'm gonna spend I'm gonna spend the majority of the time preparing for the task at hand, rather than, um, going straight into chopping the tree. I thought that was a pretty
I'm just
straightforward.
I've never. I mean, what you're asking me what each party would say about that quote,
Yeah.
or what do you mean?
What do you how do you think they would take that quote?
Um, well, I mean, I guess there would probably be two interpretations of it. One would be saying, okay, so somebody's lazing about for 4 hours before they actually get to work, and then another person might say, like you were just saying, that they were preparing for the job.
Okay.
I don't know. That's what struck me anyway.
Interesting. How about you, Frederick?
Yep. Are you hearing him okay, Fred?
Uh, when I can hear him, he comes through. Okay. Uh, I think it's a poor analogy myself. Like it's,
How
I
so?
don't know. Like if he's speaking right now, I can't hear him.
He's flashing up, but he's been cutting in and out for me.
I haven't said anything.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Well, I think the shift comes more from just the Democratic Party itself. Like I really don't see how much the Republican Party has changed in between these time periods, other than the emphasis more on social and moral conservatism that I think used to be more the the focus. Well, I'd say the focus. It well even then. Well, technically speaking, the Republican Party has always been the quote unquote liberal party, classical liberal, by any typical standards. I mean, I don't. The Republican Party also, particularly from the New England part, the northern aspect of the Republican Party, also derives from the Puritans. So I'm not so sure that the Christian conservatism, in some sense, hasn't always been there. In some respect, although the
Well,
Southern
Lincoln was
strategy of
fairly the Southern strategy of one guy who lost.
well,
Right? Like
the
they're like Nixon's Southern strategy is
the
like his strategy was, dear South, you're going to desegregate. You could do it peacefully, or we could do it by force. I prefer peacefully. That was Nixon's Southern strategy. That does not sound like a appeasement of racists.
I'm referring not to the race. I'm referring to the shift of the party to the Christian conservative part. I don't care about the race because
Well, that's
that
not
hasn't
really a
really
shift.
changed.
I mean, from Lincoln to McCarthyism to today, Christian conservatism has been there the entire time. Right? Like half of Lincoln's quotes have to do with Christian values. Like
All the while
the
skirting
the
around
quote the quote
actually
I
saying
don't ask if God is on my side. I ask if I am on God's side. Right? Like that's one of those famous quotes from Lincoln. about doing God's will and not hoping that your will is agreed to by God. Or yeah, what is it? My concern is not whether God is on our side. My greatest concern is to be on God's side, for God is always right. That's Abraham Lincoln. I looked it up so I could quote it.
Well, I do know Lincoln also had the habit of avoiding, well, at least in some speeches, actually avoiding saying God and instead using, what is it, creator or else. It's like more of the
Well, yeah,
side of it.
um, the like they talk about how what was it, the
Providence.
90s? Yeah,
I was thinking
in
of.
the 90s they were talking about how all these Christians are pro-Jew because the Jews run the world. You know what I'm talking about? How they're always talking about how pro-Israel Christians are in this country. Um, like you can go all the way back to Thomas Jefferson and the concept of you don't have to necessarily be Christian, but you're Judeo-Christian. The Jewish side of it is completely acceptable in the American view. Right? It doesn't have to necessarily be Jesus loving.
Well, I don't know. One question I always ask people is like, what? Because the way that I see it is like you've got two parties in this country that are operating on completely different wavelengths.
Well,
You know,
yeah,
I think
well,
that
yeah. That was my point that I was getting at. We got a little sidetracked. The Republican Party, even as the abolitionist party in its founding, was not an identity politics party, and it still isn't. Like um, they talk about like there are Republicans who do like big government thing, and there have been if you go all the way back to the expansion through the territories, expanding west. There were big government policies in the Republican Party. There's corruption in the Republican Party, but the party's narrative has never actually been one of identity politics. Whereas you look at the Democrat Party today, they're like, the Republican Party is the party of old white men. It's like, yeah, and 60 years ago, we were the party of the Negro, according to you, too. So literally, they can't get off of the concept of everything revolving around race. Right, like that's
right.
the
Well,
constant for their
that's
party, and us not having that as a foundational pillar of our ideas. That
yeah.
hasn't
It
changed
almost
for
seems
us
like a
either.
Linsky tact. Yeah, it almost seems like a Linsky tactics. It's like they're accusing the Republican Party of doing exactly what they're doing, which is dividing people up into particular demographics and then appealing to each of those as a particular base. You know, and whereas the Republican Party runs more on a particular set of principles, as though this is our vision for the United States. And then you look at the Democrats, and it's like they don't really have a vision per se. They are more. It seems like they're more interested in retaining power and
Well, it's funny. It's like
whatever
all
gets
of
them to
Obama,
that goal.
like all of Obama, they were playing the race card for Obama and how the Republican Party is like super crazy racist Republican Party. So like
Yeah,
every time you criticized Obama, it's because you hate black people. And then they flip it and they're like, it's Hillary's turn. It's like Hillary was literally mentored by a KKK recruiter, right? She attended his wedding, like fucking 6 years prior to running for president, where she eulogized him and said how great of a guy he was, and Bill Clinton excused the fact that he was in the KKK and filibustered the Civil Rights Act. Is like, oh, that's just what it meant being a Democrat in those days. So like, don't hold it against him. And then it's like, oh, it's her turn. By the
yeah.
way, Republicans, you're all racist. Even though she literally is fucking rubbed elbows with the KKK her entire life. She should be
Yeah.
president.
Well, I mean, you can. I mean, you can also see this echoed in the way that the parties are structured too. This is one thing I've been thinking about a lot since the 2016 election, and everything that happened with Bernie Sanders. Um, what it looks like to me is you've got specifically with the super delegates. Now, I don't know the history on that. I don't know why that exists, but um, there's a good portion of the primary vote that is selected essentially by the party itself.
Yep.
So even if you are a Democrat, your vote actually counts for less
Yeah.
because of that.
In the party that talks about how great democracy is, they circumvent democracy.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and it's that's I find that when I look at that, I mean I didn't know about that actually because I've never I've never been attracted to the Democrat Party. They don't really resonate with me. They never have.
I'm shocked.
Um, but so that was the first time I'd actually even bothered looking into the way that they run their primaries because, well, 2016 was a big election, and yeah, I don't know. You look at that particular fact about the way that they operate, the way that they run their own party. It does seem like that is something that you would institute, something that you would put in place because it makes it easier for you to control the party and then control the power influencers in your party. So, like, what made me
Well, yeah,
remember that was when you said it
it
was
consolidates
Hillary.
the power into a smaller group because a smaller group is easier to bribe, right? Like
Influence and control.
one person with a lot of power is a lot easier to convince than 1,000 people.
Well, it's just like when what was it? It was just like when Bernie was still planning to go up against Hillary into the primaries, even though based on the numbers he had lost, and he wasn't planning on conceding. He was considering running as an independent.
Yeah, the magic
Um,
numbers.
the next thing that happened there was that he got invited to the White House, had a sit down with Obama, and all of a sudden he wasn't running anymore.
Yeah, weird how that works, huh?
It is interesting how that works because it's like, Bernie Sanders probably, and rightfully so, felt robbed during the primary because to me, it's like you go and look at the rallies, right? It seemed like at the time he had far more support. There were all kinds of questions about the legitimacy of the voting.
Well, yeah, you remember who was it? What was her fucking name? Debbie Wasserman Schultz, right?
Yeah.
Um, and she was fucking rigging that shit, and then they're like, "Well, I guess you can't be chair of the DNC anymore," and immediately got hired by the Hillary campaign.
Yeah, I mean, there are plenty of examples of that where it was just like it seemed like the decision had already been made that Hillary Clinton was going to be the nominee, and even though
Yeah,
there were a shit ton of people that were far more interested in Bernie Sanders, that was just straight up ignored.
Yep.
it was decided back like in 2015. Obama ran the DNC into the ground. It was ailing debt, and they had to rely on the Clintons' money to keep it afloat.
Yep.
It was actually an unofficial coronation.
The money her foundation stole from Haiti
Probably.
and got from the Russians when she sold them uranium.
The Clinton Foundation paid off the DNC's debt.
Yep.
So they were indebted to the Clintons.
Yeah,
Bernie Sanders never had a chance.
No, yeah.
There are just plenty of examples of those types of things
Well,
in the
and
Democrat
here's the
Party that
funniest
you just
thing.
kind of look at.
Look at the Republican Party, because we had our own Bernie Sanders. He's now the fucking president of the United States, right? That was our own version. Ours was even less of a political figure at the time, and the Republican Party, the powers that be, the voices in the party were very adamantly against Trump, and he still became the nominee, and he still became the president. With the R next to his name, right? So like you can literally look at the two parties and see how differently those things went. Because Bernie Sanders was by and large the most popular candidate that the DNC had, and I don't think much of anybody outside of the power structure of the DNC thought he was going to lose to Hillary, right? The power structure knew that they'd rigged it against him. But the majority of people were trying to sue the DNC to get their donations back because they're like, clearly something fucked up happened. Give me back my money. I gave my money to support Bernie. Now it's going to Hillary, and I don't want Hillary to be president. That's where a lot of votes for Trump came from. Was that what was it called? What is it called? The walk away movement. I don't remember. Like, there's a
So-
whole
Yeah,
Twitter
it
hashtag
was
thing
the
that they're saying is fake. It's like, no,
Hashtag war
that
crime.
shit happened during the presidential election where people were suing the DNC and voting for Trump out of spite because Hillary Clinton stole the election.
yeah, those are the Bernie bros.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and now here's the thing is, yeah, we'll take your vote, but we're not going to listen to your ideas. I'm sorry, but you can vote for Trump all you want. He's not going to enact the fucking wackadoodle socialism that Bernie Sanders wants. So if you want to throw your
Mhm.
vote at it for spite, cool, more power to you. Um, like what's
Yeah,
his name?
I just
Eric Weinstein. He's like still a progressive and
Oh,
still
yeah.
on Bernie's dick. It's like let it go, dude.
What?
Yeah.
Eric Weinstein.
No, he cut out. I didn't hear what he said about him.
Oh, he's still talking about how Bernie should be president.
Yeah, a lot of people. But yeah, no, it's just that's the one glaring difference that I see between the parties right now is that we, I'm hoping that at some point the Democrat Party will reform, but I don't have a whole lot of hope for that. It seems like
Buddy,
I
you're
guess what you would
you're
call the
talking
neo.
almost 200 years of it being like that. They're not changing.
Yeah, and that's the thing is I think that the neoliberals have too much of a um, what would you call it? It's kind of like a stranglehold on the party, but also on like media organizations. They've got a whole bunch of demographics of people tied up in money. So like a lot of blacks and a lot of the voting demographics that they specifically target are tied up in programs that specifically only the Democrats are going to support.
Right.
You
Well, yeah,
know,
that's
the and it
it's a
and
scheme.
it makes sense that obviously that the people that are coming in and trying to take over the party now are socialists because obviously that's the only group of people that are going to support those programs
It's
that
the
were
only
really just
direction it can move, right?
hmm
Well, like Kanye said, which he's not the originator of it. I just like pointing out that Kanye said it. The black people are still living on the plantation, and it's like, yeah, the Democrats talk about how they're going to get you out of poverty with their magic social programs, but they've been doing this shit for what 80 years now, and it's
50 years.
definitely not getting better. Right? Nothing has gotten better, and they've been promising and delivering on those promises for 80 years, and the situation arguably is worse than it was when they started.
well, because if they solve the problem, they lose the demographic.
Exactly.
So
Well,
obviously they
that's what I'm
can't.
saying. It's like they don't have anything to. They're not offering you anything. They don't want your success, right? The Republican Party is like, we'll create a good job market. And you can go out there and pick yourself up and go make something of yourself. But that's the extent of what we're going to do. And then if you keep us in power, we'll maintain that system so you can continue to advance. And then your children will have a better foundation to start off, and they'll advance even further than you. Where the Democrats are selling the me narrative of everything is about the most selfish interest that you have. Because the Republicans are like, go out and be a hard worker, and your children are going to have a better future. Not exactly the most appealing approach, where the Democrats are like, we're going to give you shit because you deserve it because you're black. And they're like, you
Well,
know
that's the
what?
thing is
Maybe
that
you're right.
that's why.
Maybe I do just deserve to have shit given to me.
Well, that's why the when you're talking about the big key difference there between having a party based on principles versus a party based on demographics. I
Well,
don't know how else you
it's
would
based on power.
phrase that. Well, yeah,
Right?
based on
Dividing people
power.
by demographics gives power. Like in the Republican Party, there are people who are interested in power, but the Republican Party, in and of itself, isn't interested in power. Like gun rights and freedom of speech and voting transparency are not methods to give them power over you, right? Like so, it's not the same seeking of power, right? Like there are people that do seek power in every organization that exists all around the world, right? So it's not saying that there are not people who want that in the Republican Party, but the Republican Party's um, like foundational desires are about decentralizing the power, where the Democrat Party, like with their super delegate voting block system and everything. It's all designed to consolidate power, give power, and maintain power over other people. And dividing people by demographics is one of the ways of doing that.
Yeah, and so that's my main contention, I would say, in this debate, like which one has more staying power, like which one is more effective. And I think that in the short term, Democrats do get a little bit of a boost because they can appeal to
in both they do.
Well, I think that Republicans have more staying power because when you look at a system in which somebody can just run on principles of the party and a vision for the country, like Trump did, there's a much higher likelihood that you're going to be more what's the word? You're going to be able to turn more quickly anyway.
Well, as a party existing or having power. I think I misunderstood.
I'm trying to think about a.
No, I think I misunderstood.
I'm trying to think about how to. Yeah, I'm trying to think of how to phrase it exactly, but
I was thinking you were saying staying power as in like getting power and being consistently reelected is what I thought you meant, or do you mean party existence?
Yeah, in a sense. I mean, you're more consistent anyway. I mean, people know what to expect from you.
Well, I think the Republican Party does have the problem of not being able to sustain like long-term powers, not something they can do. The Democrats are a lot more poised in position to do that type of thing, especially like Obama was making things worse, and literally Trump had a message that resonated with people. But literally any candidate other than Trump, and Trump would not be the president, right? Or any other candidate other than Hillary, and Trump would not be president right now, right? Like he's only the president because she was so repugnant as a candidate that people couldn't put the support behind her. But it seems like Democrats make things bad. Like Democrats never get Democrats elected back to back, right? Like when you got JFK to Johnson, it's because he was assassinated, right? Like Johnson didn't get elected on the back of JFK leaving office. It was JFK got assassinated and LBJ ascended to the presidency, right? Whereas you have multiple times in history where a Republican president followed another Republican because they're like, this Republican did good, let's keep that going, but they can never maintain that because people get, if you're talking 16 years of Republican presidency, people kind of forget what it was like to have the Democrats, and then when recessions hit and markets go bad, people lose their jobs, things are volatile, shit happens, and the Republicans' entire approach is shit's going to happen, it's going to get good, it's going to get bad, I hope you plan for your future. So when things do get bad, the Democrats, there they are with their solution again. So they're like it's a persistent herpes that's just never going to actually go away. Just occasionally the symptoms aren't showing, right? But there's always going to be the opportunity at some point in time for the Democrats to offer their free ride tickets and it be appealing to the population.
Right, which is sort of my point, right? So like if you're a Republican, right, and things are going poorly in the country, right? And if say there's you're facing a situation where maybe you have to take austerity, right? Like let's say it gets that bad in the U.S. As a Republican, obviously you have your value system that you have to abide by. It's what you built your entire party around.
You say that,
so
but they still
selling that
reported Social Security.
Yeah, I know, and that's also part of the reason why Trump was popular, was because he was actually stating the things that the Republicans are supposed to stand for, but don't always.
Yeah.
But I guess the point being though is that if you're the Democrat Party, right, and you're running based off of single issues for particular demographics, all you have to do is just say, well, we're doing this because we think it's going to benefit X demographic. So you can literally turn on a dime with what your policy is going to be, the way that you're going to present yourself during an election. right? So that's an advantage that I think the Democrats have in the short term. But in a long term, as far as like having a standard policy, having a standard vision for the country, and a standard set of values that you hold to, um, people I think are going to be more apt to rely on something if they can identify with it. So like what I mean by that is that if the Republican value system is what people will start to identify as the actual American culture, I don't know. Did you catch the UN speech that Trump did?
Not all of
It
it.
was yesterday. Did all of it? You said
I didn't see all of it. No,
no.
saw most of it.
But basically, what he was talking about there, and that didn't go over with the Europeans, obviously, but it was basically um, explaining his vision of the United States, and he sounded to me a lot like a Republican. Like he really did sound like just a Republican stating that, look, we have our way of doing things. He even said it like the Monroe Doctrine. It's really funny. It's like
Oh god.
basically we have our
This is
affairs
our
here,
hemisphere,
and
bitch.
yeah, like we don't want anything to do with the Europeans. Don't fuck with our affairs, that kind of shit. And that sort of speech, that sort of argument. It's the same thing that like even like Ben Sass did during the Kavanaugh um, nomination. It's a recitation of this is the way that we want to structure society, and it's well thought out, and you can present that very easily to people. When you're working like what the Democrats do, and you just graphics all day long saying, "Oh, these poor minorities, poor blacks, or God, immigrants, whatever the hell you want to, whatever the topic du jour is that day," um, it doesn't have staying power. You have to constantly change what you're saying, and you're going to run into situations where you're immensely hypocritical. Like, well, it's just like you see all these little clips on floating around of like Hillary Clinton saying one thing like 10 years ago and then saying a completely different thing, and then she gets caught during like one of her fundraising campaigns saying that she has her public and her private opinion. It's like, well, no wonder, because the Democrats don't stand for anything. They don't have a vision. They have a goal to win. That's it.
I like
You know.
like the topic being the party switch lie. The If you go back to um, like slavery, you still had like some identity politics, like the Democrat narrative when for the ones in the North where they were non-slave states was very much along the lines that the black people are better off being slaves because they're not capable like the white man is, right? Like there was still
No white man's burden.
right there was still some there's still some underlying identity politics to it, and it's to maintain power, right? Gain power, maintain power is the cornerstone of the identity politics. And you have like when communism goes and becomes a thing, the Republican Party takes the mantle of being against communism. Communism is bad. It's going to destroy the world. The Democrat Party at the time was like, communism doesn't seem so bad, right? Like they were not too heavily interested in fighting communism like the Republican Party. And so during the Cold War, a lot of the Republican narrative, like you have Goldwater being like, "Oh, segregation is cool, guys," and then getting his ass blown out. But you had a lot of the Democrats are like, Republicans are bad, and Republicans being like, communists are worse. Like we're here to fight the communists. This is something that we care about is maintaining the American identity and our American values and stopping the spread of communism. Really, it's the same kind of concept of like communism is oppressing people and taking their rights ordained to them by God that no man has the right to take from any other man. And that's still like that's Trump's narrative for his campaign, right? That was kind of his thing. It's like one of the criticisms I see Republicans leveling towards Trump today is there are things that he has the power to do, yet there he is on Twitter complaining about them and how the person who's like in a position to do something um, is him, but he's not like using his executive muscle and throwing it around everywhere. He's using Twitter to harass somebody rather than, like firing them or writing an executive order. He's trying to urge the people to do what he wants via Twitter harassment. And they call him a tyrant. It's like that's literally the opposite. He could do what Obama does and just write up an executive order and just magical a law out of fucking thin air. It's like he's really doing the opposite. He's really like, I could fire this guy, replace this guy, order this guy to do it, but instead of going to Twitter, be like, you really should be doing this. It's sad, really. It's sad you're not doing this. And it's like he could actually do executive power things, and he's not. Like he's and I admire that. Like I have a genuine admiration for, because I guarantee you there are people running around the White House that know he has the power to do that who are saying you could just fire this motherfucker right now, and he's not. He's not. He's not writing a bunch of executive orders to take liberties away or force people to do things. He's urging them to do things, to make that decision on their own.
Yeah, and you know what I find funny too is when people, because here's the common argument you're going to hear back on that, because I've made the same argument, right? What you'll hear is people will say, well, I mean, if you look at just the numbers of executive orders that he's passing them at a higher rate than Obama, and it's like half of the, if not at least 3/4 of the executive orders that he's passed so far or put out there are specifically just to defang everything that Obama did.
Like, his executive orders are like, I'm removing this power from myself. It's like, you can't really qualify that in the same thing as Obama giving himself power and say that somebody giving the power away is the same thing. Right? Because that's what they're doing. Right?
And I mean, if you look at the executive authority, forget the name of it. The executive orders, kind of hate that. Just forget that word for some reason. That he's passed. Specifically, like if you look at the temporary ban of for immigration, that was such a huge ass fucking deal that everybody made a huge deal out of when he did that. There was also the
You're roboting.
Am I roboting?
Yep.
A little bit.
Good. Fuck off, faggot.
Yeah, so there was also the executive order that he put up there, basically removed the mandate for the Affordable Health Care Act. A lot. If you go through his list, the list of the executive authority or executive orders he's actually put out there, a lot of them are just to essentially disable things that are currently in play that were passed, but were put out there for or because of other executive orders that were already in play.
Sure.
And this goes into what he said he was going to do, which was specifically to get started on day one, like hit the ground running on all of this. And unfortunately, I think the problem, if you look at any president, and the reason why they pass so many executive orders in the first place is because Congress is completely ineffectual at this point.
Right.
So, he's got a majority Republican House and Senate, and he still can't repeal the Affordable Health Care Act. And then obviously came down to just McCain, but even with that, he still doesn't have the ability to do it because of the way Congress acts, even when he's got a supermajority. So, I mean, it's kind of one of those things where it's good that he would be moving towards getting rid of that sort of executive power. But to expect anyone to just simply not use executive authority out of principle would be retarded. Because here's exactly what would happen. All of his critics would come out and say, look at all the things that he's not doing. He made all these promises and he's not carrying through on any of them.
Well, it's like the immigration thing where he keeps urging Congress to change immigration laws. He's like, ICE and the Border Patrol are enforcing the laws that are on the books, which is what they're supposed to do. This is the executive branch. We execute the law. If you don't like it, change the law. It's like that's literally how it's supposed to function, and they're calling him a tyrant for it.
Yeah, exactly. Because of the ineffectuality of Congress. It's like, I'm sorry that you've like basically outsourced your jobs to these all these alphabet agencies out there, but you did get elected for a particular reason. That was to pass legislation. And if you're incapable of doing that, I'm kind of scratching my head as to why you still have a job.
Well, yeah,
You know?
you have I can't fucking remember what it's called, but the police have discretion on what laws they're going to enforce when and where, and it's like no, that's not how that works, right? Like literally, a police officer, a federal agent, anybody who's in that career field should execute every law, like every violation. They should go and do what it is that they're supposed to do, and if people like don't like it, then you should be complaining to your legislator at your state if it's the police, or your city if it's like a city ordinance, or the federal government if it's a federal agent if they're doing something you don't like, because their job is to enforce the law. If that law exists, they are supposed to enforce it. They shouldn't have the discretion to pick and choose when and on whom they're going to enforce laws. That's pretty fucked up and tyrannical, right? It's like, that sucks. I'm not going to sit here and act like that would be a fucking peachy world to live in. But you violate the law and the cop sees you, the cop should enforce that law on you. And if that's a problem and you're like, this law is unjust, that's the legislator's job. That's their whole purpose of being there. That's why they're taking your taxpayer money and buying their yachts and condos and fucking private jets with it. Claire McCaskill, you fucking cunt.
I see this as I sometimes I look like when I was watching the confirmation hearing for Kavanaugh.
Pretty bad. And I'm full green here. I don't understand.
Yeah, one sec.
Anyways, but yeah, so ICE and Border Patrol are enforcing the laws and the judicial decisions that were made on cases about these laws and what precedent was set forward, and they're out there doing what they're supposed to be doing, and people are acting like this is some horrible, horrific thing that's happening, when all they're doing is enforcing the laws that are on the books. And then all these people whose job it is to write and change laws are the ones who are complaining and saying that he should be doing something different, when that's literally what they're there for.
Yeah, that's their role. And sometimes I look at it was like the Kavanaugh hearing anyway. Like, one thing that I found really funny about that is to me, like half of the circus was already being done by the protesters that were there. So I was kind of questioning why, the senators that were there were making such a circus of it themselves. Specifically, Hirono from Florida, and then there was Cory Booker.
I love Booker. He's always good for a laugh.
He puts on a show, and I think that
this is my Spartacus moment. Bitch, what?
Yeah,
do you not know
I think
who
that's
Spartacus
why.
Is?
Well, that's the thing is, I think that's why people like him. I kind of wonder.
Because he's an idiot who doesn't know what he's talking about.
Well, because he puts on a show, and I think that's what people expect from a congressman, is like, instead of them actually doing something, that if they just have the semblance of doing something, like if they look like they're busy, people are gonna respond well to that. Because like he made this big old deal, all of them, but he was one of the key people, about how many documents that they got, how little time they had to, how little time that they had to view everything. And it was funny because Grassley kept just kind of joking with them. You can tell that Grassley actually likes the guy. He was just like, he kept making fun of him because he was like, okay, so how long are we going to sit here and listen to you repeat the same thing over and over again? Because that's what he was doing. He would just get on these tirades and just start repeating himself over and over and over again, saying the same thing. And
he's a lawyer. Like, people talk about how legislators need to be lawyers, and presidents need to have experience. It's like you do realize that pick a senator. I don't even care what side of the aisle you waving the banner for, or what side of the aisle you pick in Congress, or which house you pick. Somebody who's acting like an ass, in your opinion, they're a fucking lawyer, because almost all of them who are there are lawyers, right? So it's
well, yeah. I just
like, why not pick the asshole drunk at the fucking the corner store begging for 50 cents? What, just elect that motherfucker to legislator, and it wouldn't be any worse than what you got now.
I just think that a lot of people probably look at that sort of, I don't know what you want to call it, chicanery, and think that that's an actual like action, like that he's actually accomplishing something there, and it's like, really, all that he's doing is wasting time. He's not bringing up any salient points. He's brought up one point, which Grassley refuted. Like, Grassley was sitting there, like, explaining to them that they had plenty of time to review all the public documents that were out there. He told everyone how many documents were out there. He explained why these 42,000 documents were irrelevant and they couldn't get their hands on them any sooner because it all came back to Bush's lawyer. So the Senate didn't have any control over that. That the Republicans had just as much time with the documents as the Democrats did. He explained all of this to him, and Corey just kept going on. Right. Just kept going on, saying the same thing over and over again. And I think some people look at that and they're like, see, he's doing his job. It's like, not, like, what is he actually doing? Is he really doing anything there? Or is he just yammering on?
Yeah, well, that brings me to, have you heard of Justice for Victims of Lynching Act of 2018?
Sorry, for Justice for what?
Justice for Victims of Lynching Act of 2018.
Heard about it.
No.
I gave this peachy piece of legislation a look over, and so Miss Harris, Mr. Scott, Mr. Booker, Miss Baldwin, Miss Murray, Mr. Blumenthal, Mr. Lee, Mr. Durbin, Mr. Kane, Mr. Von Hollen, Mr. Nelson, Mr. Gillibrand, Mr. Jones, Mr. King, Mr. Reed, Miss Hirono, Mr. Sanders, Miss Kolberkar, Miss Warren, Mr. Brown, Mr. Whitehouse, Miss Feinstein, and Miss Hassan are all co-authors of this bill. So you could just tell by 3/4 of the names, right? Those are prominent members of the Senate who are the crazy wackadoodles you see on the 24-hour news cycle saying stupid shit all the time, right? And so apparently this whole bill is Congress's findings are that the crime of lynching succeeded slavery as the ultimate expression of racism in the United States. Lynching was a widely acknowledged practice in the United States until the middle of the 20th century. It's like, so wait, this is a 2018 act, right? The middle of the 20th century, the 1950s and 1960s. So literally has no relevance, right? So from 1882 to 1968, 4,742 people, predominantly African Americans, were lynched in the United States, right? And so it goes on and just lists these little fun facts. But you know what all of these Democrats who created this bill to virtue signal about how lynching is bad, do you know what they left out of this entire thing? How the fucking KKK was that part of the Democrat Party was conducting the overwhelming majority of these lynchings. They've not mentioned anywhere. But you know who they do blame? The Unite the Right rally that espouses racism, extremism, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, and white supremacy, and use all resources available to the president and the president's cabinet to address the growing prevalence of those hate groups in the United States. And they specifically talk about the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, as being that group that they're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, you see what I mean? Like,
like it literally goes on in virtue signals about how lynching 70 fucking years ago was really bad. Leaves out the part where that was the Democrat Party doing the lynching, and then brings up the Unite the Right rally and demands that the president take action to stop these hate groups. This gets voted on Friday, by the way.
Joy.
This is what I'm talking about when I talk about the Democrats. This is the kind of stupid shenanigans they get up to.
I only know this exists because it was on the schedule posted about the vote, and the Democrats were sharing the Senate's daily schedule to talk about how the Republicans scheduled the vote for Kavanaugh's confirmation the day after they're going to hear the testimony from his accuser, or his victim, as they put it. And then at the bottom of that list, I see that they're going to vote on the Justice for Victims of Lynching Act of 2018. I'm like, is lynching still a thing? Why has the mainstream media not been telling me about all these lynchings that are going on? And so I was like, I gotta read this bill. And it's literally just virtue signaling about shit that happened 70 years ago and demanding the president stop right-wing rallies in the United States because they promote racism, extremism, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, and white supremacy. I'm like, yeah.
Of course.
So they basically take their own history, they talk about how bad it is, refuse to acknowledge that it's actually their party's history, and then demand that the Republican president stop right-wing rallies.
Sure. Yeah, why not?
Like, there's no connection between the two things, but they're gonna totally throw it in there.
Yeah.
That is the definition of misdirection right there. From the title and the first 3/4 of the bill, it's all about lynching and how horrible it is. And we need to acknowledge how horrible it is and how it was a tool of racism. Also, we need to stop right-wingers from having rallies in the United States. It's fucking beautiful.
You know, I'd be honest with you.
All the things going on in the country, this is what they wrote a bill about. It's actually being voted on, right? It's not like it was something introduced and then ignored. It's being voted on in 2 days.
All I'm hearing are more reasons why we need just to establish a one-party state.
Oh God, no.
Yeah, so you want to turn the Space Force into the Imperial Fleet, or what do you?
Why not?
Just fuck
the
it.
Senate will never stand for this. The Emperor has dissolved the Senate. Do it, Trump. Just dissolve Congress. Like, you had your chance.
Honestly,
rename the governors moths.
Honestly, the fucking God Emperor memes will just get so much better. Like, this aged so well. Like,
oh. Here we go.
Well, it's like these assholes want to destroy the republic. Fine, we'll replace it with an empire. We'll see how you like it. I won't weep for dead commies.
But my whole thing was to point out that clearly you cannot go with what a title says, because nobody was lynched at the Unite the Right rally, and then taking the Unite the Right rally and saying similar rallies, right? It's like, so they're basically going to encompass all right-wing rallies from that point on if it were to pass, because I really don't think it's going to. But here's the thing is, when the Republicans vote it down and it doesn't fucking pass, then they're going to be like, the racist Republicans think lynching's okay. It's like there's no winning for the Senate Republicans.
Well, that's why so many people think that people like Richard Spencer, even you could go as far as most of the people that are active in the alt-right, that actually do like on the ground stuff, are just controlled opposition. Because I mean, all you have to do is just say the alt-right equals the right wing, right? And then everything follows from that. Everything flows from there. It's like, oh well, they're banning people on Twitter. Oh, why? Well, because they were part of the alt-right, and then people just view that as synonymous with the right wing, and everything gets conflated, and it turns into this perfect like way to attack anyone that's right wing. I mean, it's ridiculous. Like at some point, that's got to give. You know, like that. At some point, like people have to catch on.
The alt right are socialists with ethnic qualifiers to their socialism, right? And it's like, so you're focusing on the ethnic part, where the actual right wing is focusing on the socialism part. It's like we don't care what brand of socialism you have, we don't like any of it, even if you're like, you're like all the white people only get socialism. We're still like, no, socialism's bad. And then you're like, these socialists over here that want a different brand of socialism, they're right wing. It's like the right wing is anti-socialism. Like we're very clear on this point. So anybody who wants socialism gets a helicopter ride. All right, you and the commies get in the back of the fucking chopper.
Yeah, and there's a very significant divergence between the alt-right and the right wing. It's like such a misnomer too.
Well, it's
like, I wish
they calling Hitler right wing, and you're like, compared to what? Communism. Okay, so where are the actual right wing people who are like National Socialism, Democratic Socialism, Socialism, Ethnic Socialism is all socialism and it's all bad? Where do you put those people on the compass? Right, like, because you're calling people who are promoting the same socialist concept of Adolf Hitler, and actually a little bit more on the socialist side than Adolf Hitler was, as the far right. And it's like, so clearly, if socialism is on the right and communism is on the left, I'm somewhere completely else. I'm on a different fucking scale, by that logic, right? Like it doesn't even make sense. It's like, so your scale goes from the far right is socialism, the far left is communism. Basically, you're saying I don't exist because I think all of those fucking categories can go fuck themselves.
I think we're approaching it the wrong way. The left and the right both view the political compass differently.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. Is they're saying like the socialists are far right. Like we think those are all over there. They're the right side of your left wing. Like they're not over here in our camp. There's no socialism banner over here. Right?
Yeah,
I would put socialism further to the right than communism, but I wouldn't put it on the right side. Right? It's not centrist. It's still left of center. It's just closer to the center than communism.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that those guys actually want, a lot of the things that they suggest are they fly completely in the face of traditional American conservatism.
I don't know how you could even put communism on the political compass. If the furthest left of the political compass is absolute state control, that's socialism. Communism is supposed to be this weird fucking utopia where there's no state and everything's devolved to the people.
We're assuming that communism could even happen.
It's just another name for totalitarian socialism because that's where it stops.
Yeah, but
as far as I'm concerned, there's no difference because communism always stops at socialism.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I just think it's one of those.
If you take the concept of communism as being an international, one new world order, global level of socialism, right? It's a more extreme totalitarian. So rather than having like a socialist society or country or state, communism says no, you all have to be, kind of like the caliphate says we all have to be Muslim or dead. That's how communism approaches socialism. You have to be a socialist or be dead. So I would say it's more extreme.
Yeah. I don't know. It seems like, to me, I look at it, and it's just like people like Richard Spencer have done more to help the Democrats than I think anything that Republicans could have failed at. Because it's like, even if you look at Charlottesville, right, if you look at the outcome of that, as after all of the dust settled from that, they removed the, I think it was the mayor, I want to say, the Republican mayor, and they put this woman in charge. It was another woman that was in the mayor's office. I forget the woman's name now, but if you go look at her bio, this woman is the pinnacle of social justice, and it's like, great. So here's what you achieved. You got a Republican out of office because of this, out of his appointed office, and they put someone else in play now who's going to have pretty much the exact opposite effect of what you were trying to accomplish in the first place.
Right.
You know, and
he's nothing more than the token Nazi for the left wing to pull out as controlled opposition.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it's just like, this is why I like the fringe. The fringe, the only thing that the fringe does of either side, right, is they help the.
He's not on the right.
Well, it's the way he's viewed, though.
Right. What I'm saying, that's their thing. That's like saying Hitler was right wing, and like, yeah, because why? Like, fucking Nate. What is it about Hitler? Like, as his governmental policy that you're like, that's totally a Republican thing, right? Like, it doesn't make fucking sense.
No, I agree, but dispelling that myth is going to be pretty difficult.
Well,
you know
yeah,
what I mean?
Because we allowed the fucking the pro-communist fucks to take over the education system. I can't remember. Fucking Eric Weinstein was on the Rubin Report.
Yeah, I caught that too. Yeah.
He was talking about the void of information, right? Where like the information just doesn't exist when you try to find it because nobody's putting it out there or they're intentionally hiding it. That's what they do with like the Nuremberg meetings. Looked at the American Democrat Party as to how to treat the Jews based on how Democrats treated black people. You know how hard that information is to actually find on the internet? Like that's a true factual thing. All of the like World War II is the most covered war in the entire history of the fucking world. You know how hard it is to find the Nuremberg transcripts when they had the first Nuremberg meetings? Because they specifically cite the American Democrat Party as being the what do you call it? The archetype of how they wanted their Nazi regime to treat Jews. Go ahead, try and find it. Like you'll find something about it. You're not going to find a lot of in-depth information. You're not going to find articles written about it. It's just not there. You might find Dinesh D'Souza. He was talking about it for a couple years, and nobody like even bothers to debunk him or write about it because they know that it's fucking true, or they can't find the information to debunk him because that information just is not fucking easy to find. And how many things do you think there are in like American history, especially like in politics, like Joe Biden? You know, he voted against numerous anti-racism laws at his time in the Senate. You know, the fucking guy who was vice president to Barack Obama. You remember that guy? Like his time in the Senate was spent voting down anti-racism laws. That apparently, like, do you remember that being brought up by a single Republican? Right, when Obama was running, nobody thought to ask why the fuck is this dude who's got a consistent record of being anti-black running as the fucking vice president for a black guy? Isn't that a little fucking weird to anybody else? No, just me? I'm the only one asking these questions? That's the fucking problem.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
Yeah, like, there's a whole like laundry list of. It's called a writer. Sometimes it's actually intentionally written into it, and sometimes they'll edit it and they'll add something to it. So this is something that I did not see anybody talking about, but Trump has been signing things for the VA to like help the veterans, and you know how people love talking about that.
Yeah,
I don't.
It's all over the place.
I mean, like literally, like here's there was one that was passed one of the first things that was passed, and then there's this contractor that got the contract. So like I got 3 VA appointments from signing up on the internet, which I didn't even know you could sign up on the internet before. Which so I don't even know if that existed before. Nobody told me about that before fucking last month. But I signed up and filled out information and got 3 fucking appointments within 2 weeks, and they're all with this contractor who got the contract because of this bill that was proposed in Congress that was passed and signed by the president into law. And this contractor got the contract to basically do appointments for veterans to get them into the VA process to alleviate the stress on the VA because it's a shitty bureaucracy. So now the VA actually is probably going to end up with competition because there's 2 more bills. I think one in the House and one in the Senate that address different things about the VA that are going to that are leasing bills in order to expand the contractability to give outside companies contracts to do the VA's job for them. Right? Nobody's talking about that. One of them is for the one in the House is put up by a Democrat. If anybody's interested, Derek Kilmer from Washington.
Yeah, no, I remember, yeah, I haven't been, because of all the other bullshit going on. I haven't actually been following the all the shit that's been going on with the VA. I know that Trump did originally put in, he put in that one guy as the head of the VA, and that was basically what he was talking about wanting to do, which was just to basically start giving people the option to look outside of just the VA for, health services and whatnot.
Yeah, actually, while you were saying that, I found a third bill that is being put up, and this is to require the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to improve the provision of services and benefits for the Department of Veterans Affairs for veterans who experience domestic violence, sexual assault, and for other purposes. So there's actually 3 right now that are being put up. This one's actually from a Democrat from New York, Nydia Velasquez, definitely a Puerto Rican. She's from New York. She's got to be. Even if she was Mexican, she'd be Puerto Rican. It's just how it works. So like they're talking about how the VA is like a fucking horrendous failure under Obama, and Trump was saying he was going to fix that, and nobody is talking about how he's doing that. Like, and that's the Republicans giving him credit and bolstering. Like, look, there are things that are being done. Like, because here's the thing: is if you're a Republican representative in the House or the Senate, unless you voted against it, that's a good mark for you too, right? Like, hey, look at this: the veterans are starting to get help. This was one of the campaign things that Trump talked about, right? So you make yourself look good, you make your president look good, and we're going into a fucking midterm, and literally they're not fucking talking about it. Like, why isn't the GOP just putting out random ass fucking ads throughout the country promoting things that Republicans have done good and why you should vote Republican, right? And just blanket, like don't even like focus the ads anywhere. Put them on like Hulu and YouTube to just hit everybody nationwide. Like, fuck it, right? Don't be like, here, vote for this person. Be like, vote for Republicans because this is what the Republicans have been doing since Trump took office. And that's just not, like, the Democrats do things kind of like that, but they do it through, like, news articles and shit like that. We don't have that apparatus, that reach and influence, because you're talking, they have, all of pop culture, right? They have syndicated radio shows across the country that are like the morning talk things on like the most popular radio stations, the most popular television stations. The majority of the mainstream media networks are in their camp, right? Like they have this whole apparatus. They don't need to spend the money doing that, but the Republicans are not doing anything to even combat that or counteract that at all. And there are plenty of good things that are being proposed and being voted on, and being signed into law that are not mentioned at all by anybody, because the left doesn't want to mention them, and the right is just too stupid to mention them.
Yeah. No, that's. I mean, there were plenty of. The thing is that we get sidelined by all the drama, because I mean, there's obviously only like 24 hours in the news cycle, so it's hard to catch people's attention when you got a million things happening with Trump. So like the idea, I think obviously their strategy going into this was, let's just make every little thing that we can about Trump's, fuck ups, dominate the news cycle, and then that's all that people are going to remember. And you see
the Republicans are not trying to counteract that, right? Like, I really appreciate Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire, but let's not sit here and pretend like they've got national influence.
Well, he's getting his own show on Fox.
On Fox, right? But Fox doesn't have the influence of MSNBC, ABC, CNN, and the other one that I always fucking forget, right? It's like you have one, and then they have five, right? Like they just have the numbers over us. We have to do more than think that Fox News versus five other equivalents to Fox News on the other side is somehow equal. Like, that's fucking stupid. It's like,
right.
I'm going to go to a firefight against 10 dudes. I'm going to be by myself, but I only have one pistol with one magazine. They'd be like, this is a fair fight. It's like, could I at least have two fucking pistols? How about that, right? Like, could I at least, bring an extra weapon for myself to fucking carry if I can't bring more people, right? Like, because make another Fox News. You could try to do that. That's not even what I'm just saying. Bring a second pistol to the gunfight that you're already outnumbered in. That's all I'm saying. Fucking go Tomb Raider on their bitch asses.
I don't know.
That's why. That's why they lose. I mean the House. It looks like it might go Democrat. Like it's a higher likelihood than not. And the Senate is a coin toss, and it's not because the Republicans haven't done anything. Like, there are plenty of things that are like stupid, pointless things that, like, there's this fucking one Republican chick, I can't remember where she's from, but she got like all these like 4 or 5 acts of like declaring historical sites. Like, this is her entire fucking claim to fame in the fucking Senate or in the House, is making fucking historical sites out of places. Let me see if I can fucking find her. And it's like, oh, well, there's like half of the fucking Republican bills for that month are from one fucking chick, and they're all about making things historical landmarks. Like, this is what the Republicans are up to. Like, fuck, where is it? I just saw it too. Give me a second. Here it is, yeah. Jennifer Gonzalez Cullen is a Republican from Puerto Rico who's just declaring a bunch of shit fucking landmarks. And wait, she has one Economic Development Act for Distressed Zones of 2018, and then everything else is declaring things landmarks. Right? She's a Puerto Rican Republican, which is like never talked about on the mainstream media either. That Puerto Rico has elected a Republican.
Yeah, see, I don't see the point in playing that game with the Democrats either, though. Like
Well, no, I think it's just fun. Like, how often does Fox News mention these bills as things that they're like, hey, this is good. Let your congressman know this is something you support, right? Have you seen that on Fox News? Ever? I've never seen them do that. I have seen occasionally, I think Tucker Carlson was attacking something he didn't like that was in the House, right? But there was no call to action from his audience. He just verbally bitch slapped somebody around on his show who was supporting it, and that was the extent of it, right? And through the entire rest of Fox News, I've never seen them say, hey, the Elementary and Secondary School Counseling Act, like that's a bad thing that fucking Catherine Clark in the House of Representatives has supported. Make sure you let your read the legislation and let your fucking representative know that whether you're for or against that. I'm personally against that. Or how about the Iran Payments Accountability Act of 2018 that Mike Bishop put in the House of Representatives, in which they want a probe to look into the money that was given to Iran and ensure that nothing nefarious happened when that happened, right? There are plenty of Republicans who are 100% behind that idea. Nobody's out there telling them, "Hey, go read this, make sure you agree with what it's saying, and then let your representative know to vote yes on this." Right? That's not happening, and that's been sitting there in a month waiting to get through the House. Right? Nobody on Fox News is saying, "Hey, here's a fucking bill to find out whether or not fucking Obama paid Iran. What was it, paid off for the hostages? Was that what it was? You remember?
No, I don't remember what you're talking about there.
The fucking billions of dollars that Obama gave to Iran in like 2015. Right?
I thought that was part of the just the general Iran deal for disarmament.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying is there's an actual bill in the House of Representatives to look into that. Right? Nobody's talking about it. Nobody's saying, yeah, there we go. Let's actually do that. Let's put that to bed, right? So, okay, if you're Republican and that's one of your talking points, if you're a Democrat and you think nothing bad happened, you should support this bill, because then you could throw it in the Democrats' face that there was an intelligence investigation that looked into it and determined that nothing bad happened while the Republicans were in power. That's good. That's good if you're a Democrat, right? If you're a Republican who thinks something bad happened there, then you want this too. So why is nobody talking about it?
Because they don't actually care. They don't want to. They don't. At this point, you just need to start purging members of the Republican Party. They're worthless.
Well, we have been.
We keep it out.
Jeff Flake is one of them.
Yeah, here's one of the things. Here's another bill that I'm actually not against. The Fracking Disclosure and Safety Act. And the reason is because I've looked into this and I've had arguments about this and have cited the actual scientific research that's gone into this. And all this shit that they say about fracking and causing these earthquakes and all this shit has been debunked by real actual science, right? So there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, and passing that, it's going to put a little bit of a burden on the oil. Fuck them, they're billionaires anyway, right? You got to be a little bit more transparent in the things that you do, but they don't actually have anything to hide. The thing that's actually causing the earthquakes is the water waste that they're pumping into empty holes in the ground that used to be wells, and then that water, when it's fucking settling and shit, is creating pressure that's causing earthquakes. It's not the actual fracking and the removing of the oil that's doing it. It's what is being done with water waste, which is not. It's like sewage water, the fracking gel, runoff water from like contaminated sources and shit like that can't be circulated back into like water purification, and they're pumping it into the ground and it's causing earthquakes. But they're blaming it on fracking in the oil industry. The oil industry isn't doing it. So I actually support that bill, because maybe then we can do something about this nasty ass water that we're pumping into the ground, and maybe we could find a way to fucking purify it and put it back into the system, rather than just putting it underground and thinking out of sight, out of mind, and it's causing fucking earthquakes. Right? But here you go. Here's one that we should be against. Are you ready for this?
Sure.
Okay. This bill is called Combating Implicit Bias in Education.
Chopper.
You want
I'm excited already.
You want to hear the text?
No.
No.
Not really. Just throw it in the fire.
You're gonna like this. The Secretary of Education shall award grants on a competitive basis to local educational agencies to provide training to educators, principals, and other staff of elementary schools and secondary schools on implicit bias for the purposes of ending discrimination based on such bias, including in the administration of exclusionary discipline, in access to gifted and talented programs, and in the apportionment of academic resources, improving the school climate and the relationship between student and educator, principals, and other staff of the elementary and secondary school, and improving the academic achievement and attainment of students. So basically, we're going to give you money if you're more progressive. And this is literally something that they think they're going to get passed under a Republican run Congress. Because that's literally what it comes down to is we're going to give money to the schools if you promise to teach our progressive narrative.
Yeah, this was what Jordan Peterson was one of the things that he was so pissed off about was the concept of implicit bias, because apparently the research out there on it is very thin, and it's not something that you can really base policy around at this point.
Well, I don't think it's something you can actually base policy around ever.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying it's completely unjustifiable at this point.
Well, no, it's in the same category as what the fuck is it? The shit that they're basically where they're saying your thoughts are fucking I can't remember what it is.
What, microaggressions?
Yeah, right. So they're like basically like you're having a thought, and even though it's not any of your actions, so they're basically like trying to do thought control shit. And so implicit bias is basically saying that you have an unconscious bias against a race or gender or sexual orientation or religion or something like that that's affecting you, but it's something that you're not even aware of that exists, right? Because it's subconscious. Right here in the bill, it's got the definition. Implicit bias means bias with respect to actual or perceived race, religion, sex, disability, ethnicity, socioeconomic status that results from subconsciously held attitudes, beliefs, or associations. So
perceived. Perceived. So it's just, I think it is, therefore it is.
Right. Well, yeah, no, they're saying that you're perceiving somebody to be a race, a religion, a gender, a disability, because you can't, know what race or religion or gender somebody is. Those things can only be perceived, or socioeconomic status. Like you can't look at somebody who's like, I'm fucking homeless and live under a bridge and assume they're poor, right? You can only perceive that they're poor. That doesn't mean they're actually poor. They might be rich in love. You don't know. Quit being a bigot. So, yeah, it says in the definition, subconsciously held attitudes, beliefs, or associations. So there is no amount of anything that's going to, because it basically, the intent is to intrude on thoughts that you can't even control and control them.
Mm-hmm.
That's the intent.
Well,
and
yeah,
they want to give $10 million for this.
I'm sure they do.
No,
well,
that's how much they want the grants to be for. $10 million.
The only thing that this is going to accomplish, and I think they know it, is it's going to raise racial consciousness. So, like, people are going to be much more careful and aware of their actions around minorities, which is going to make them more sensitive to the those particular political arguments that are being constantly made of, well, it's like how you're constantly hit with the inner city poor people, right? Those are the people that we should all care about because they have it the hardest. And then it's like, well, what about all the people in all of these areas that are like white and impoverished? You don't believe that must just be your implicit bias talking. You think that because of your white privilege that that somehow these minorities have an equal amount of hardship as white people.
Well, here you go. It's Representative Eleanor Holmes Norton. She is up for re-election, and her phone number is 202-225-8050. if anybody would like to give her their opinion of this bill. And if you live in her district, which is, give me just a second, the District of Columbia at large, so apparently the whole District of Columbia, you feel free to vote her right the fuck on out of office.
Bitch, your bill's dog shit.
That is my suggestion for how to handle that fucking legislative piece of garbage.
People are, what's funny is that, like, people become aware of this shit eventually. Like, you can only sit there and, like, listen to how hard it is for other people for so long when you've got your own troubles going on, They're
going to burn up the goodwill of white Americans very quickly at this rate.
Well, what's gonna happen is people are gonna get sick of it and then not gonna be interested at all. And then that's just gonna stoke further divisions. I mean, it's already bad enough. I think right now we're probably the most divided that we've been since fucking, at least fucking race riots.
Well, yeah. So, I did a little interview with mental health for the VA today, and it's the new contract company thanks to Donald Trump. And so I think because I live in a rural region, I'm like the first experience of like an actual combat veteran this guy has had. And so like he's asking me about traumatic experiences that I had like during my service. So I'm like going through and I'm listing things, and he's like, "Okay, I think we've got enough." And I was like, "Are you serious? Because that's like barely halfway through my first deployment. Like I haven't even gotten to the worst shit yet." And he was already like, "That's more than enough. We're good on that." And then you got people who are like, "Oh, this middle class lady going to Harvard, she's so oppressed because she's black and her Porsche is like 3 years old instead of brand new, unlike her fellow classmates." And I'm like, this dude, or that chick. It's like, I hope my children have half of the advantages in life that she has, but I'm supposed to believe she's oppressed and I should feel sorry for her.
Press D to deport.
Well, it's like I mean, like I found a torture chamber in Iraq where they were taking Iraqi people and literally disassembling them while still alive, but I'm supposed to feel sorry for a black chick going to Harvard because she's black. Like, I'm sorry. I have zero sympathy for you because I have seen some of the worst things a human being could do to another human being. And I know there are people who are living those experiences and, like, experiencing those things, not witnessing them like I did, literally living those things, having them happen to them on a daily basis. I do not feel sorry for you in your Ivy League education. Sorry. It's never going to happen. Go fuck yourself.
Yeah. What's really funny is that, they came up in the news. I think it was either today or yesterday. Facebook is getting sued by one of their employees.
Yeah.
Because they were not forced, but they were hired to start moderating all of the bullshit that gets posted on Facebook.
Right.
And this woman apparently now is suing because she got PTSD from all the shit that she saw on Facebook.
All the Pepes.
Well, there's some pretty fucked up shit that goes up there. Like it's not like PTSD worthy. Like, so she was seeing like there sometimes you see like live suicides and shit like that.
Oh yeah, who hasn't though?
But I'm sitting there like,
I'll take that. That's like a 6-figure job. I'll take that fucking job right now, and you'll never hear me complain.
Oh yeah, it's just like one of those things where like, you knew what you were getting into. It's not like I'm going to work today and I'm probably going to see somebody try to decapitate themselves with like a lawnmower blade.
Well, back in the day,
Surely.
I used to post all the split dick pictures on my Facebook for no reason. So.
Surely she signed a contract where she acknowledged that she'd be seeing that kind of stuff. How have they not just thrown this out immediately?
Because our legal system has been just completely fucked over the last 10 years.
I'm just trying to imagine like the snowflake that they hired at Facebook right? And then they throw her on this assignment, right? And she's just sitting there like in her like fuzzy sweatshirt and drinking her latte, and then clicks on a folder and just like starts bawling and crying. Like like what did you expect? I mean, I'm sure that this person was not working in a satellite office. And guarantee you, she's like fucking in Silicon Valley, because that's where a lot of those offices are. And it's like, what did you expect? You think some snowflake's gonna be able to handle that?
I'll have to do that work from home. I'm not moving back to California, but I'll do that job and I'll never sue. Of course,
Yeah.
might have a problem with me allowing shit that you probably don't want, like those suicide videos. I don't see a problem. I'd be like, share all, put it on everybody's timeline. They're like, you got to stop doing that.
I think we just need to start slapping pussies again. Patton did nothing
grab them by
wrong.
the front hole.
Patton did nothing wrong.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like you're seeing it through a computer screen too. You know, I mean, it's like those people are like killing themselves like left, right, and center, and they're all posting it up to Facebook. I would imagine the more grotesque stuff is probably pretty rare. You're probably just seeing the typical, like, that's it. See, I would imagine that the shit she was probably seeing was the kind of shit that we see on Discord like every day. You know? Like, it's Tuesday. Where are my crazy DMs from some random guy called PUBG Extreme? Some guy, like, fucking, you know, cutting his dick off. You know, like, that's fucking normal. I don't know. Like, maybe I'm just desensitized to it, but I don't know. Like, what kind of fucking snowflake can't handle that shit?
Right.
It's like Tuesday on the internet. I don't know.
Here you go. Here's a counteract, right? So this one is called the Student Empowerment Act, all right? And so the treatment of elementary and secondary tuition, any reference in this section to the term qualified higher education expense shall include a reference to expenses for tuition, curricular materials, books or other instructional materials, online education, tutoring, license as a teacher in any state, has taught at an eligible educational institution, is a subject matter expert in the relevant subject, blah, 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 blah. And basically this is to amend the IRS code for K through 12 educators, so that, like, to give education forgiveness for becoming a public school teacher, right? I go back and forth, but this is expanding it to public, private, and religious schools. So instead of just the public school sector, if they get a job at any school for K through 12, they'll be getting that exemption. So and homeschooling funding for curriculum materials, so that parents who are homeschooling their children would be able to acquire more educational materials if they're of a lower income. And this is from a representative from Missouri. And Missouri is one of the places where the lower income people homeschooling is not uncommon. So take that as you will.
How does that... I wonder how that plays with Common Core.
Well, that's one of the bigger reasons why people were doing that. They're like, this shit doesn't make any sense. I'd rather my stay-at-home wife is gonna educate the kids from now on while I go and work because I'm a real man or something like that. Whatever toxic narrative that the left hates. That
I saw this funny image actually the other day, and it was like this woman who was she was teaching some. I mean, they had to be in like 4th grade, somewhere on there. And she's got up on the display this math equation. It was like 5 times 2, and then in parentheses it was 2 times 2. And 5 times 4, and then in parentheses 2 times 2. And next to it, it said that either 16 or 1 can both be the correct answer based on how you play the order of operations. And apparently that was a change that came through Common Core.
Yep. Yeah.
Because it just depends on how you follow the order of operations. And it's just like, well, that doesn't seem at all dangerous. Like,
it's like, yes, math is now subjective.
Well, no,
Yeah.
consider this, okay? In Desert Storm, we had the artillery guns. I can't fucking, or no, the Patriot system, right? That we were using to shoot rockets into Iraq, and they were stationed in multiple areas in the region. They're shooting long range missiles. The program, right? So like the mathematical algorithms that were used in the program, one of them had improperly, like the program improperly set up time to where time was not running at an accurate time, and it actually created a fatal error, and one of the devices actually blew up before they fixed it, right? So like literally the entire platform exploded. So like a bunch of rockets with explosives exploded all together in one spot in a friendly location because of this mathematical error that went into the code. And so now we're creating where math can mean anything. It's like that's like we're trying to create a space force. Like, so we're gonna like vent the fucking International Space Station into space because this asshole decided that it equaled fucking 2 instead of 16. Right?
Yeah.
Like it's serious. Like, think about the smart cars and all this shit being developed, and STEM fields are heavy in mathematics, and all of this technology that's coming out is heavy in mathematics. And if you have a shit mathematics foundation, you literally have no future. All right, what are you gonna do? The trash man's gonna be automated in 10 years. So when these fucking Common Core kids graduate, all the menial jobs that somebody who doesn't know math would do are gonna be fucking gone.
Well, I found it funny because it was like the that in that sit down that Ruben had with Weinstein. Weinstein brought up the what was it called, the explosion principle in mathematics.
Yeah.
You know, where basically if you have any sort of like hitch in the giddy up in mathematics, if you can change the rule from being like 2 times 2 equals chicken, right? That in and of itself will cause innumerable failures within the system of mathematics, and the same sort of issue exists within all of the other sciences as well. So like if you start fucking around with biology, for example, you know, and you start saying that there are no cognitive differences between men and women, for example, that's going to create a whole bunch of fucking issues within biology because you're accepting a cognitive dissonance. That's going to then explode out into multiple areas of research and problems, right? So you can't do that. You know, the facts are the facts, and the studies themselves have to lead you to the answers. You can't presuppose the answers because you want a particular solution.
Right.
So I found it really funny when I saw that from Common Core. I'm like, literally, if it's true, now that might have just been a meme. I don't know. I didn't look into it.
Oh no, the shit that Common Core does, like, the way that they supposed to do things, it doesn't make any logical, consistent sense. And Bill Clinton was one of the people who was funding this research to create the Common Core program. He was not like hands-on; he was basically a funder of it. And the design of it was to make it to where the stupidest kid would succeed at an equal rate to the smartest kid, right? That was their purpose. Not to actually like make anybody better at anything, but to make them all equal at the rate that they learn things.
Right, which flies entirely in the face of like what is it, the Matthew principle in economics. It's just basically that you know, it's essentially the spoils go to the victor, right? And it's almost kind of like a core tenet in meritocracy. So what you're doing is you're fucking up the whole system. It's no wonder that there's so many smart kids out there that just literally don't give a fuck. If they're not going to be rewarded for their intelligence or their hard work.
That was a part of Common Core, that Common Core schools are not allowed to advance kids to, like, how you skip a grade? That was done away with. That was something that's not allowed in Common Core. So you're not allowed to be better than the other students.
Yeah, no, I look at that kind of stuff and I'm like, that just to me anyway. It just seems to fly in the face of human nature.
Yeah.
Like if what drives people forward is struggle and adversity and then reward, if you remove the reward, right? What is it that's going to drive people forward exactly? It seems like you're essentially going to create a society of mediocrity.
Well, you're punishing success. Well, you're teaching or educating the success is bad in children, right? And that's going to be something that is harder to deprogram them from later in life, right? So it's the type of thing, like, if you spent 12 years of your formative years being shown, like, through example, not necessarily words, that as you succeed you're actually penalized for it, that's going to transfer over when they go into the workforce. They're not going to want to be the top performer in work because they're going to subconsciously think that's going to result in them being fired or getting a reduction in pay or some weird shit, right? Like, you're literally. And here's the thing: is the main proponents of that, their kids go to private school where that is not what is taught, right? And so I'm supposed to not think it's some nefarious thing where they're trying to make the general population useful idiots, and then they're going to educate their children in these private schools that teach proper math and science and English, so that they can be the superior class. I'm supposed to think that's not what's going on, even though they're punishing children for being smart in public schools and not doing it in private schools. Right? It's two entirely different systems. The private school rewards you for being intelligent, and the public school punishes you for it. That's literally how that system works.
Yeah, I'm just more of a fan of let the chips fall where they may. If you've got a kid that's intelligent, then they should reap the rewards, because that's how it's going to be later in life anyway. I mean, when they get out there in the real world, you can either have a completely apathetic child who turns into an apathetic adult who is going to do the bare ass minimum just to get by because he thinks that society's not going to reward him for his good work. Or you can have a child who is motivated and turns into a motivated adult who's going to, build him or herself up to be more, consistently strive for more. And I think that's necessary. I think that's a very necessary component of society, Yeah. So.
One thing is, I have no problem with the advancing kids to grades because they're performing. That was actually one of the biggest defeating moments in my life, was when I was held back a grade because I was too young. Like, that was it. I had straight A's, and they were like, "Oh, you're too young. You're gonna have to repeat this grade," for no fucking reason. Like, I had straight A. I wasn't doing bad. I wasn't underperforming. I was getting straight A's, and they're like, "Oh, you shouldn't have been able to start school when you did, and you're too young to be in this grade. So now you have to repeat the grade." And I'm like, "I'm not failing." And they're like, "No, you're not failing." And then I literally the entire next year just completely showed my ass and got F's, and I almost actually failed and got held back a second time because I did not give a fuck because they held me back the first time.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I'm just saying, like, I guess to summarize it, it's just like, let Doogie Howser be fucking Doogie Howser. If you got a smart kid that's 14, they're like blowing through the fucking grades. Let them blow through their fucking grades, and let the graduate when they're 14. Who gives a shit? You know,
Well, yeah, that's
good for them.
the military had to allow GEDs for like homeschool kids,
Mm.
because a lot of states were trying to, surprise, surprise, liberal states were creating policies where there was no track for getting a diploma. You take the GED test, right? So you got homeschooled. If you didn't finish high school in a public school, your only your only course would be to take a GED test, and then you would get a GED. And so they had to make it to where the GED is the equivalent of having, like, in actuality, because like in private companies they still don't see GEDs and high school diplomas as being the same, but
Right.
in the eyes of the government they had to look at them as the same, because they were penalizing kids who were being homeschooled and getting a much better education, um, being homeschooled, and they're basically being penalized for just the fact that they were homeschooled and didn't go to the public education system.
Mm.
Which, here's the thing is, if they make, I have absolutely no problem with the state making a standardized test that all kids have to take in public, private, or homeschool settings. So it doesn't matter what school you're going to, but if you're at like X age, you at least have to be able to pass this test, right? So by the time you're age 7, you have to pass this test. If you're 10, you got to pass it. You know what I mean? I have no problem with that. And then that's the requirement if you're homeschooling your kids. There is a standardized test that the state wants you to take to ensure that your kid's actually getting an education. I don't have any problem with that, but penalizing for being homeschooled, because yeah, sure, they're probably crazy religious folks who are homeschooling their kids on the earth being flat and fucking, everything we don't understand is Jesus, and everything we don't like is the devil. And that's pretty much the extent of the education, and the kids are fucking inbred, illiterate fucking hillbillies who only know how to make moonshine and crack. I'm sure that exists. And
I'm sure it exists too, but it's probably really fucking rare.
right, and we should stop that, right? Like, if it's one kid, that's one kid too many. Creating a standardized test and saying your kid can't pass a standardized test, you either need to put them in a public or private school because your homeschooling is not adequate, right? Or you run the risk of losing your child for, like child neglect. But that obviously has to be something that's under extreme scrutiny and not be able to be abused by the left, who wants to indoctrinate your children with Common Core, right? Because that's the problem. Is like, you say, okay, we're trying to protect these children. You really have to make sure it's designed in a way that can't be abused by, because in New York they were trying to make it to where schools would be open 16 hours a day. So literally the kids would wake up, go to school, have breakfast, and then stay in school all day until they had dinner, and then go home and go to sleep. So their parents would literally not be with the kids at all for 5 days a week. That it was something they were trying to make a thing in New York.
Yeah, I don't understand that mentality.
The union teachers would raise your kids. Remember, this is the same exact school district that has rubber rooms where the unions won't allow actual teachers who've actually abused children to be fired. So they still work in the school district. They're just not allowed to be near children because of whatever thing that they did. And the union won't let them fire them. That's how bad that education system is. And they're trying, and the government is trying to make laws where the kids stay at those schools all waking hours of the day. Right? It's not like it's a great school and they're getting a great education, right? It's a failing school system.
Yeah, that's one of those things that, I mean, you'd think that at some point they'd stop and ask themselves the question: is it a good thing that these kids are away from their parents this much? I mean,
yes,
who's raising
in their
the child?
mind's eye, yes. Yeah, no, that is literally what they were trying to do, is have the teachers raise the children. Right? Like, the indoctrination of children, they're like, well, we only have them X amount of hours, and we're not getting enough out of these kids. Because here's the thing: is the education system, it's a really crappy system that's in place, right? The teachers are bad. This is an actual verifiable thing. News articles from liberal news sources and conservative news sources verify that the unions are doing this and have these bad teachers that they're allowing, or that they're not allowing the school districts to get rid of and bring in better teachers. They're passing legislation to create an even worse education system that they're putting in place, and they're also trying to pass legislation to where the 90% of the influence on the child's life comes from the teachers. Right? It's an entire system they're trying to design where they control every aspect of what your child learns, knows, and thinks is right. And those school systems are run by Democrats. Right? They want control of the children. It's not a crazy, fringe conspiracy theory. It's a literal thing that they're actually that's verifiable with a little bit of research that they're actually trying to do. Um, I can't remember what the organization is called, but there's the National Teachers Union, and there's an organization that does seminars to teach teachers on things and like the new policies and the things that they're trying to implement nationwide for the education system and shit. And they openly say that they want more teacher influence over the student's life and more aspects of the life, and that the single motherhood, societal breakdown that the Democrat Party created, and now they're like, well, because these single mothers are working and they can't take care of their kids and they're not doing a good job, the education system should pick up that slack and raise the children for them. That's what they're actually pushing.
It just seems like another one of those runaway problems that I was talking about. It's like you've got the women in the workforce now. Okay. Now you've got to figure out what you're going to do with the children all day. Okay. Well, now we need programs for the children. Now we have to. Yeah, this is what I'm talking about. It's just like you're fucking with a system that now it's like now you've created a situation where children. I mean, it's almost worse than like the latchkey kids. If you remember the latchkey kids shit, now you have a situation where you're not going to, in a lot of cases, have parents at home with at least one parent or be able to get in touch with at least one parent during the day. And it just seems like that is not healthy for. It wouldn't. I can't imagine that would be healthy for a kid. I mean, orphans don't do that fucking great, do they?
No. Well, here's the thing, and it's kind of funny, is because the pushing women into the workforce actually hurts single mothers, because you drive down, like the job market didn't double, the workforce doubled, which drives down wages. So if you are a single mom and you do have to work and support your family, your income potential drastically goes down. Right, whereas if there wasn't a big push for all of the women to go into the workplace too, then single mothers would at least have better negotiating power in the workforce and would be better suited to support their children if the workforce wasn't so big.
Yeah, I always kind of wonder sometimes if that's at least partially the reason. Well, yeah, that too, but that's more tinfoil hat time. But it's also that, like,
you when say that until you're against a wall and there's a fucking firing squad asking for your last words.
I wonder if they planned this. Yeah, but it's one of those things where it's like, if I wonder sometimes if that is part of the reason that we saw such a huge uptick in the prevalence of divorce. It wasn't necessarily because women had more options. It's because that they had more dissatisfaction as a direct result of the change.
Well, yeah,
you know what I mean?
Here's the thing: there's a whole complementary system that was in place that they decided that system doesn't work and we want to get rid of it. But why didn't the system, like, women were working through the entire history of mankind, right? Like, when
definitely through the history of the U.S., yeah.
Well, no, like, you go back to the hunter-gatherer society, there were hunters and gatherers. The gatherers were the women. The women did the gathering while the men went off and did the hunting. So they had their jobs and tasks that they did. And when an economy came up, there were jobs that women did all throughout history, right?
Mhm.
It's not like they act like all women were chained into the kitchen. It's like, well,
Slaves. Yeah.
that's just not how it worked. Um, and so they decided that not enough women were working. He's like, but if you wanted to be a working woman, like the entire fucking premise of Gone with the Wind is she was looking for a man to support her. She didn't find a man to support her, so she went out and built an empire on her own, right? Like did all of the work and built what she had, and then decided to marry the guy who had literally been a guy who was like, I'll support you the entire fucking time that she was ignoring. So yeah, and that's what was that book was written in what, the 1890s, I think. It was made a movie in like the 1930s. It's like, so that's even even then that was the a thing that was being told in stories that existed. Um, so then they pushed the women and like, no, all the women have to go out and get an education and get a job and be earners. And no, you're not satisfied, because here's the thing: if you're a man and you're single and you go and you work all day, now we have creature comforts like our Xbox and Netflix and ordering takeout food, right?
Right.
There are these things are literally providing you with entertainment to kill your time of being alone, to replace the complimentary person who would be making you dinner that would be ready when you get home from work. And so when both people are working, that whole aspect of the relationship is unfulfilled by either of you, right? And it could go the other way. The woman could be the full-time worker and the man could be at home, cooking and cleaning and doing the household duties. That would be fine. But having both people both working, you're both unsatisfied because there's an entire aspect that makes the relationship work that nobody is doing, right? It's like having a truck driving company with no mechanics, right? You have nobody to do the mechanic work, and all your trucks keep breaking down. And it's a pretty miserable business, right? It's not going to be a successful business because you're not maintaining your fleet. So one side of the job is being done, but the other side isn't, and the mechanics are all decided they're going to be drivers now. But you still need the trucks; they still need to be maintained. Those things still need to be done. And yeah, it's very unsatisfying. If you're both working full time, then who do you expect to do, the cooking, the cleaning, the grocery shopping? If you have kids, who's taking the kids to school? Who's getting the kids up for school? Um, there's all those aspects of life that neither one of you are fulfilling if you're both working.
Well, not only that, I mean, it's like there's this large, or this big question of why is it that people are having less children in our society, and a lot of people point to the convenience factor. They say that people are just deciding to have less children because they're getting richer, and it's like, I don't know if that's true necessarily. I think most of the people that I've spoken with, and I'm just going to take like a common sense approach to it. If it requires two sources of income in the common American household in order to raise a family, that means that you're not going to be able to be around your children or that actively involved in your children's life, or maybe as much as you'd like to be.
Right.
Which means that I would imagine if people are holding out or deciding not to have children, it's not because they have other interests or they've made the conscious decision to do so. It's that they've decided not to have children because the level of involvement in their own life would be too great. I mean, it basically, if the I think that the people that are,
that whole aspect of a family, right? Like I consider being in a relationship even without kids, because you got to start somewhere, right? So you're not just starting out with all of a sudden there's a fucking baby and here's the start of the relationship. So the aspects, right? Like the whole dating thing is to find that complementary person so that you can start a family together, right? If you're both working full time, as I said, that entire side of it, nobody is fulfilling that. So neither one of you feel fulfilled, which I think contributes to the divorce rate.
Everything becomes extremely chaotic because it's like in a traditional relationship, right? the the actual duties are pretty much laid out by the relationship itself. It's like the working person brings home the money, right?
Right.
And then the person who stays home helps out around the house, takes care of the kids, etc. Um, you used to be able to do that on a single income in the U.S., and I think that's what fostered that particular model. But now, because it requires two parents, that means that when you've got young children, you have to figure out how you're going to pay for childcare. So you've got,
Yeah,
like a
a third
babysitter.
person. Well, that's the same thing. Like I said, ordering takeout, right? You get now you have to order out childcare.
Right.
So
So the costs are going up, which means that you're going to have to spend more time at work. Wages are down, obviously. Relative, I'd say relative to cost of living anyway.
and
You
you got
know,
to think it causes the consumer like more people working and earning money will naturally cause the prices of things to go up, right? Because there's more money out in the market, and so you're like, okay, well, I'm not selling to, you know, because technically it'd be 50% of the population, right? So it is 100% of the population, but only 50% of them are working. We'll say, right, of the adult population. So your marketing is targeting like specific demographics and things like that. The more people that are out there, the more appealing your product is. There's more money moving from hand to hand. It's going to cause prices to go up of everything, even though the labor cost goes down. Right, your supply and demand now your demand just doubles on a lot of products. It causes the price to go up.
mm.
So, simple economics.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just the way that I see it, though, I don't think that it's necessarily that people are richer and that's the reason that they're not having children. I think
Oh
that
no,
life
that
is just,
doesn't make sense.
yeah, because it doesn't follow. I think most people would have children if they had the time and energy to do it.
Well, yeah,
Um,
rich people having low reproductive rates is not uncommon anyway.
well, they're probably, when you say rich, they're probably talking about like the
100 heirs.
upper, like the really rich people. When, I'm saying like, what's the minimum amount of money that you'd have to make given the cost of a child today to be able to support it, right?
And
I'm
honestly,
sure
I would
I'm
say
sure
it's
the numbers are out there.
150,000. Um, now the figure is lower, and I think that figure is stupid. I would say 150,000. Because really, like, kids are not cheap. The public school system is shit. Um, one parent working, so you got to think your cost of living, so your mortgage cost, your car cost, your insurance cost, the food cost, the clothing cost, for three people. Um,
School
just
supplies, any
well,
number of
yeah,
things.
just the billing of it alone is annually is something like 78,000 is the average for the country. I think in Missouri it's like in the low 60s. Places like California it's like 100,000. But even in a place like Missouri, where it's like okay, 60,000, I would say you would want to make 150,000 because you need to have your savings for your retirement. And then you would need to also have your savings for any type of repair, like if your heater goes out in the winter, your AC in the summer, your car breaks down, you get laid off, or you get injured. Like there's all these other factors that they don't determine
Yeah,
when that number that's out there. I want to say it's just under 80,000 is what they say, like 78,000 or something. It's like yeah, but
right.
that is literally you living paycheck to paycheck and providing a mediocre at best life for your child and your family. And if something
Well,
bad happens, you're all fucked and you're now in the poorhouse, which I don't think
yeah,
is the way that you should plan your fucking family.
right. And I think most people recognize that. I mean, if you just go through life, right, um, working and earning money, you know how much money it costs to just take care of yourself. You
Yeah.
know, now add two or three dependents to that. Wife, two kids.
Yeah,
Um,
your utilities, or not your utilities, but like your rent and car insurance and stuff like that, typically
yeah,
won't go up too awful much. That'll like your rent will, unless you're living in a studio apartment. But like typically I rented like 2 bedroom apartments, so a 2 bedroom apartment is perfect for a family of 3. Um, if you're buying a home, obviously, if you're already buying a home, which I think is probably the position you should be in before starting a family. So like
yeah,
when you're calculating your cost, your mortgage should already be a part of your expenses when you're calculating it what it's going to cost to start a family, not start a family and then try to buy a house. I think that's completely backwards and a horrible way to go about it.
yeah. No, I agree. I mean, you've got you can. I think you can safely assume that you're at least tripling the cost of what it takes to just simply take care of yourself, to even have one child. You
Yeah,
know.
and that's if you actually want, to like take care of your child. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, like if you were like, well, we'll get all the clothes at Goodwill and put them in public education, and they won't do any extracurricular activities, you could probably cut that down. Don't buy your wife any nice things, and just treat her like a house slave. I'm sure you could get that down to only doubling your cost.
Yeah. So I don't know. When people just simply take the simple route of I don't I haven't done any research into it myself, but the argument that it's just simply because we live in a richer society that people are having fewer children. I don't I don't believe that. I don't. It just doesn't pass the gut test for me.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's the most natural thing two people could do. I mean, it's literally if you want to talk about a purpose in life, it is legitimately the only thing that we do as a species is
Yeah.
reproduce. It's what all life does. So to say that, well, people get rich in resources and then don't spend that on having children or reproducing, that doesn't make sense to me. You know, there's in my estimation, if human beings are not moving towards the goal of actually reproducing, you've got a serious cultural problem.
Oh
Like
yeah, yeah,
there's
we
a
do.
there's an issue there. You know.
Um, well, especially like, um, was it the Obama era? It's not like the economy was strong, and so like if you're thinking about actually financially thinking about starting a family and not just knocking up some random barmaid, um, you're looking at it and you're like, the economy fucking sucks. And, like if I lose my job, will I even find another job? Like
Yeah.
it's not a good time. Like how many millions of people lost their jobs? Because I mean, I lost my job twice, so I'm 2 of that statistic. I don't know how well that transfers over to the greater society. But like millions of jobs were lost, like just gone. 800,000 coal jobs, 1.4 million oil field jobs, just just of those 2 fucking fields alone. Um,
Right.
a couple million military and government contract jobs were fucking gone. I want to say it was something around the ballpark of like 10 million jobs in total during the Obama administration. It's like, so no, yeah, that entire time, people saying like, I'm not going to make a baby. I'm going to make a conscious effort to not knock anybody up because I'm afraid for the future. And the last thing I want to do is live with a baby under the underpass in the middle of winter. Um,
Right.
it's a completely legitimate concern for them to have. And I think if the economy gets better and it stays better, we'll see an increase. We won't see like the baby boomer generation type numbers happen or
No,
anything
I
like
don't
that.
think so. You
But
just
I
want a
think it'll
replacement
grow
rate of
up.
2 point. Yeah, you just want a replacement rate of 2.1. That's
Yeah.
literally all you have to have accomplished to have a society, and because we don't have a high infant mortality rate, it's just minuscule here. So 2.1 is more than enough. That should be achievable, but for whatever reason, richest country on the fucking planet, we have a problem achieving that. Why, I don't know.
Well,
I don't think.
we also promote the idea to women, like in our culture, our pop culture specifically, magazines, television, movies, of waiting until they're like mid 30s and 40s
Yeah.
to make a baby, and it's like, yeah, cool, make a retarded baby. That's gonna help. That'll give your life fucking joy, right? Like the older you get, like once you hit 30, the percentage starts like increasing exponentially of having like a defect in your child, and I'm personally thinking like that is a deterrent for me. So like when you get there and then you realize like you're 35 years old, you're a woman, and now the you have to go see a fertility doctor, and you're talking, you're gonna spend $200,000 in fertility treatments to get pregnant, and you got a 50% chance that your child's gonna end up with Down syndrome. You're kind of like, oh, well, it looks like I'm never going to have children. If only I would have known this when I was 20. But I'm not going to tell a bunch of 20-year-olds to be like, hey, don't fucking listen to that narrative. I'm just going to be a bitter old cunt and convince them to be as bitter and old cunts like me. Because you see these feminists who have, like, no children. They're just, like, bitter, miserable fucking people trying to convince young women to become bitter, miserable people.
Well, you also have to take into account that, like, what does the dating pool look like at 35?
Well, yeah,
if there's
well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, even if they can find a man who's actually worth having the seed put in you, your uterus isn't worth his seed. So.
Yeah. There's definitely an issue with people waiting to have children that long. I'd say, I don't know, I would imagine the ideal age, it would be probably 27.
Mid-20s.
Yeah, because you think you've got time, if you're going to go to university, you've got time to get through that. You'll be about 22, 23 when you get out. Then that gives you about 4 years to develop or, put down wealth, assuming that you're actually working towards this goal in the first place, right? And then once you've got enough saved, you should, in that 4-year period of time, be able to meet at least one person that's decent enough to settle down with.
I mean, you have, all of college as well.
Yeah.
So here's the thing: if you find a guy who's actually going to like accomplish things in his life, you don't need to concern yourself so deeply with your education and financial future if you're picking mates properly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that could go either way. Like Ben Shapiro talks about how his dad was like a more of a stay-at-home dad and mom was the worker, and in his marriage now, I guarantee you he's the one that's with the children more than his wife is, because his wife's a doctor and he does a 30-minute fucking podcast once a day. Obviously, he's the one spending the majority of time. So and nobody's going to argue against him being a very traditionalist person. And obviously he's doing the stay-at-home father thing. So it could go either way. So if you're like, no, I really do, I am one of the few women who actually do want to work and go out there and earn, then find a guy who is willing to be your stay-at-home husband, who's going to, raise the children after you birth them, so that you can go back to work. There's nothing wrong with that, but don't force yourself to go into the workforce when you don't really feel like you want to do that. Don't let society pressure you into doing things that you don't think you want.
Well, I think with an integrated workforce, and if just looking at the graduation rates in university right now, it seems like that's going to be a much more common experience for men anyway.
But that's the problem. One, those men are just as rare as the women who actually want to be in the workforce. And you have a lot more women who were basically told they need to go to college and get an education and get a job, which is not necessarily true. Right? Like, if you want to do that, but we're basically pushing them all into doing that when they don't want to do that. And now there's more women in college who are going to be looking for men that earn more than them, and they're not going to be able to find them because obviously there's more women out there.
Yeah, exactly. Good luck at doing that at 35 too. That's
like, where have all the good men gone? Well, while you were off being a slut, this nice traditional woman married him. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's like, now you're ready to settle down, and you're like, why are all these dudes like divorced with children? Because that's all that's left. Because the good guys are still married and they're raising their children with their wives. And while you're out fucking these dudes who are divorced because they were fucking you on the side.
Yeah, you'd think. See, this is why I think it's important to have these particular traditional values, because you know this is something that's reinforced too through Christianity, and I keep beating that drum, but or just any, well, most mainstream religions enforce it, Christian religions anyway.
And
You know,
Islam.
well, Islam is, yeah, I mean, if you want to go whole hog on it, I guess, pun intended. But, yeah, no, it's because it gives people a common framework. So when you're out there in the world, right, and you meet someone, you can have a reasonable expectation that that other person is essentially looking for or looking to achieve the same goals as laid out by said religion as you are. I can tell you that in my experience, just dating women for like the last 10 years, there hasn't been, with any of them really, a concerted life goal or plan or system in place to negotiate any of that. It's all just kind of been like flying by the seat of our pants kind of bullshit, you know. And then you wonder why the relationship didn't work out. It's like, well, you didn't pick a heading. You were kind of just treading water. It's no wonder the thing didn't work out. You know, it's like
I remember, what was I, a junior in high school? And this chick like had a crush on me for like 6 months, and I was like, okay, we'll date. And then I just explained to her, I'm like, this is the life trajectory. This is my path. This is what I want. I want this before I have children. I want this many children. And she was like completely taken aback. Like, no, I'm not trying to fuck around. Like this is what I want. And if I'm not gonna find a woman who's gonna give me that, I'm not going to settle for you, right?
right, exactly.
We either have the goals of accomplishing things like I want to own a house, preferably have no mortgage when I have my first child, and I want to have my first child by the time I'm 27, right? Like at the latest, and you know, a lot of women they turn around and run.
Yeah, you know what, and you know what's really fucking funny is
Still trying to marry me now?
Yeah, exactly. Dude, I had this chick that I dated when I was like in my mid-20s, and it didn't work out then because I was like serious. I was trying to get serious anyway, and she was like, I just want to fuck around. I'm like, all right, well, you go do that then. Like, it was like a year and a half ago, I met up with this chick again, and she's all like trying to like get a family going and together and shit. And I'm just like, yeah, no.
Well, you and your syphilis-ridden vagina can just fuck right off.
Yeah.
Well, no, I've had not one, not two, but 3 ex-girlfriends look me up after they were not interested in what I was offering and being like, oh, that's totally what I'm looking for. Like, well, you're like 10 years too late. Go fuck yourself.
Well, the problem with it, because I used to work with this girl, right, is that, you know, it's like the reason that I turned it down was like, well, I can't say I turned it down. I basically was like, yeah, we could fuck, but that's about as far as that's gonna go. And it was because it was like, how am I supposed to go through and trust someone who wasn't interested in this in the first place? How do I know that this isn't just a whim? Because that's what informed your last decision to not want this the last time around. You know, I can't trust someone like that, especially not with like raising children at some point. Like, that's retarded. Yeah, that's how you end up divorced with child support payments.
Yeah, and like raising children is not some like easy walk in the park thing. Like it is.
Yeah.
It is a full-time job. That's one of the things that I hate when like you have 2 parents that are like full-time workers. It's like you're completely neglecting this full-time non-paid job that you decided to take on, and you're not doing it. Right, but it's fucking somebody's life up, right? Like this kid doesn't have a mom or a dad, right? So it's not like dad's there, you know, nights and weekends, and you know, you do fun stuff like because you get like the housewives and they complain about like fun dad. But it's like, well, yeah, like that's the only time he gets to spend with him, and then he wants to have fun because he also wants to decompress from his job, and it's like, and it sucks, but that is the agreement that the 2 of you made, that you're going to do this full-time non-paid job. and he's going to do a full-time paid job in order to support you and
Yeah.
the little bundle of joy that you made. And nobody said it's a fucking rose garden. It's easy. And if they did, they were a fucking liar.
Yeah, and see that's the funny thing to me. It's just like if people actually had a common framework, right? Because that's the thing, is that this chick that I'm talking about specifically had this notion in her head that she was just going to have fun during her 20s, and it's like, okay, but you realize you're going to pass up a shit ton of opportunities by doing that. So like, there's going to be plenty of situations where that this is probably something that you're going to want, later in life, and you're going to pass all of that up for what, fucking around for 10 years?
Well, yeah, it's very simple. If you're a woman and you want to get married and have a comfortable life and raise children, right? Then you need to be finding this motherfucker before he finishes law school, before he finishes medical school, or whatever it is he's doing, and then, ensure that you have the same values, goals, and life trajectories, and be a good woman to him being a good man, right? So don't be with a shitty guy who's gonna fucking, once he gets successful, he's gonna leave you for a 20-something year old when he's like 40, or do like Donald Trump and leave you for a 20-year-old when he's 60. Don't be with that guy. Pick a guy that's like, okay, this guy isn't like super fun, exciting, fucking doing extreme sports and, bangs like a porn star. Yeah, that's not really something to plan your future on. Get your priorities in order. Because if that is the future that you want, you have to start planning on that, when you're 20, not when you're fucking 35.
Well, exactly, because it takes a lot of time to get to know somebody in a real way. Like, there are a lot of people who think that they can just get married after like 3-4 months, and it's like, this isn't. You can't fast track this shit.
Well, like the age difference between men and women complain about older men. It's like, okay, well, here's the thing: if you're 20 years old and you want to be married and have children, like that's your life that you want, getting a 24, 25, 26-year-old guy and getting in a relationship with him as he's starting that, like that, you basically get to skip the him going to school or starting his career and establishing himself in a career. You get to actually skip that really shitty part because you don't have to do any of that stuff. You just have to establish the relationship with him, which he's got to go and either go to school to get educated in his career or get years of experience in whatever field it is he's going to work in to establish himself, to actually get to a point where he has money where he can consider supporting a family. And then he also has to do the hard work of establishing a relationship and ensuring that the two of you are compatible and will spend your future together. You only have to do the second part. So I'm not sure why these 35-year-old women are complaining that 35-year-old men are married to like 29-year-old women.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, because you fucked up and wanted to go be a whore and she didn't. It's the man's fault. Because that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's everybody's fault but yours. I get it.
Yeah, and this is, I think, it's really funny. I've met some women who are like, they, for whatever reason, didn't watch enough TV or something, right? And they didn't get into their heads that they wanted to spend their 20s screwing around, right? And these are the same women that have 2 children, the family's doing pretty well, that are well off, they're happy, and it really, I think it is just like part of this culture that we have out there, though, like that there's guys do it too, though. I mean, it's not just women. There are dudes out there that will spend a good portion of their young life just plowing through as many women as they possibly can.
Right.
I was criminal of that. And it's you lose out on, like, because what you develop is you develop this really good ability to get women's attention, right? But there's no thinking long term. So that's as a guide, like that's the skill that you develop, right? You develop the skill of getting a woman's interest initially. You don't develop the skill of building a relationship that's going to be able to last a long time. So when you go to do it or try to do it, all you have any practice in is just like getting in a woman's pants, right? So like that is not a worthwhile skill to develop, but a lot of guys do that, you know. And it's like a lot of women have followed in those kind of footsteps, and they've been.
They're like, oh, the men are emotionally detached, so I can be too, and then they wonder why they're crying every other night. They're getting blown the fuck out by dudes, and then they're like, oh, why am I not happy? Oh.
Yeah, because that's the funny thing too, because
really
like
happy either.
it's short lived.
Well, here's the thing: is they do get some enjoyment and things like that, but they're not crying or anything like that. So they're not unhappy. They're temporarily happy from the experience, but they're not unhappy and don't feel shitty about themselves afterwards like women do. And here's the thing: is like there are multiple women who tell the story of like, yeah, I went and did the slutting thing, and then I felt very hollow, empty, used, and depressed about it. And it's like, yeah, the men, not so much that problem. But that doesn't mean that they're happy, in that lifestyle. Like it's a fun, exciting thing to do, the thrill of the hunt, if you will. But it's not like a happy, satisfying life for men either.
Yeah, it's kind of like hunting, but you have to throw every fish back. Or, well, fishing, I guess, would probably be what I was going for there. But you get the idea. So, I mean, that's, yeah, I don't know. There's that's I think a particular problem within our society, and I think that is something that religion solves for, at least traditional values do. Right? So yeah, I don't know. It's something like I don't know if I'm willing to put the tinfoil hat on and be like, oh yeah, it's just totally like it's just totally planned by the globalists. Like I'm not going down that road, but it's definitely been perpetuated by a lot of dissolving our traditional values. It's like runaway serendipitous problems. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So like the UN, right? I've never been a fan of the UN. Did you know that the UN is literally the New World Order plan? Like the globalists who wanted one government to rule the world. The UN was their foothold to start that. Like that's the entire purpose of the creation of the UN. These people got together and were like, in order to create the singular government of the world, we need to first create an organization, an international organization to get, the cooperation among each other. And then it's supposed to eventually evolve into being a government over the countries that are in. And then it's supposed to envelop the entire world. Like this is literally the plan they created.
Yeah,
it's not a conspiracy. Like that's literally what there's an entire organization who openly says that, just nobody ever talks about it. And the same thing with the EU. Like that, the EU was supposed to unify all of Europe and eventually become one solid federal government, and then that federal government is supposed to be absorbed into the UN. And basically rule the UN because the majority of the people in that organization were European aristocrats, and then that organization, then the EU becomes the most powerful group in the UN, creates that as one federal government over the entire world. That is literally their plan. It's what their goal is. It's what they're trying to accomplish. They still today, that's the goal. All right, not a conspiracy theory. Literally what they say. It's their stated goal. It's like if a serial killer's like, I'm going to cut your skin off and wear it as a fucking hat, and then you're like, that's just a conspiracy theory. It's like, no, he's telling you his intent. There's a big difference.
Yeah.
Right. So like people like Alex Jones, they throw out the conspiracy theory nonsense stuff with the New World Order, and they're turning the frogs gay with the chemicals in the water. And it's like, yeah, here's the problem: is it's almost like when they talk about how the CIA creates these false, crazy conspiracy theories to cover up the real scandal that's going on. And sometimes it feels like, is that Alex Jones? Like, is he literally paid by the CIA to make everything sound crazier than it actually is? Because the UN and the EU are literally from the same globalist organization that originally, at the end of World War I and World War II, tried to create like one united Europe to begin with. They failed at that, and then they created the EU, which is supposed to be the trading bloc that has been steadily becoming a government, and the European people, right, of the countries were originally very against the idea of a singular European government. Look at how they talk about the EU now. Like, it is a government, and it's always been that way, and that isn't true. But it's a conspiracy, right? You're crazy. You think they're trying to take over, even though that's literally their stated goal. Like how crazy of a conspiracy is it to be like they just said they're trying to take over and take all power?
Yeah, I think really what it is it's like with Alex Jones, like the whole globalism shtick that he's got going on there, uh, is he's got the skeleton of it right, and like what the push is for internationalist kind of like a further development of like neoliberal thought in international trade, open borders, centralized planning worldwide, if you will. Um, there's in a sense there's some truth to that, like that there are elements out there that are trying to do that. George Soros comes to mind.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, like, there are actual organizations that are prominent things that we know about that are, like, the UN is not some abstract organization. Like, they have power, create legislation, have literally gone to war. It's not like some fringe thing.
Right.
It's a real thing with real power that the quote unquote
Well, I'm not
globalists
even.
created.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not even challenging that. I'm just saying like that there is an obvious. There are obviously elements of society out there that want that kind of stuff. Um, it's not really difficult to how do they say bell the cat, so to speak, to
Yeah, but
figure out.
nobody's stopping them.
There are groups out there that are.
Well, no, see, Brexit is like, we're gonna opt out of your globalist agenda, but they're not stopping it, which means eventually they're gonna be absorbed back into it, right? So they're just like, we're not going to be a part of this right now, but their goal is to take everything over anyway. So it's kind of like not stopping Hitler when Hitler was violating the sanctions that was put on Germany. And they're like, we're not going to stop you now. We're just going to tell you, like, that's a bad Hitler. We don't like what you're doing. But we're not going to do anything about it. And then what happened? Hitler fucking started murdering millions of people across Europe. And then, like,
Yeah.
now we don't have a choice. Like, that's the same exact thing that's going on with the EU. Right?
Dude, you know what? I'm actually kind of with. Too bad Fred left, but I'm kind of like with Fred on this whole notion of the European question.
Yeah.
Right? If they, I say we just go completely hands off, fuck up Europe again, and then when there's like one concerted power in Europe, like right when they're getting their shit back together after like the collapse, and they've got like their one like government going on over there, just nuke all of it.
No,
it seems like
we should just take over Germany, subjugate the German people, and kind of breed out the German society. Make Germany the 51st state. We'll rename it to something else. It won't be Germany anymore. We'll kill the German language, but we'll keep like the historical aspect that is Germany, right? But the German people will be no more. It'll solve all European problems. And then when they're like, we're going to build this one European Union, we'll be like, sorry, but the 51st state of the United States is right in the middle of Europe, and no.
Yeah, it's the problem is that they continually try to institutionalize, which I find really fucking hilarious for all of the work and attempts to get away from things like fascism and monarchy and set up these
New fascism.
democracy and stuff. It's like they're going right back to rebuilding another institution that's going to like oppress them.
Yep.
It's like, what's the what? It's like you can't teach it like an old dog new tricks kind of situation. It's like, yeah, you can get rid of the fucking monarch,